It's good to see you. My name is Jerry Shefsick, Nevada Arts Council Board Chair and Panel Chair for today's grant panel review. And I call this meeting to order at 9:33 a.m. Thursday, August 3rd, 2023. Welcome everyone to the Nevada Arts Council Fiscal Year 2024 Project Grant for Organizations Panel Review. This public meeting is being recorded. Please remember to identify yourself each time you speak and to speak loudly and clearly so that your comments will be clearly recorded and so that the audience members can hear you. At this time, will Nevada Arts Council staff confirm that this meeting was properly posted?
This is Tony Manfredi. The meeting has been properly posted and noticed.
This is Jerry Shefsick. Thank you. And thank you to those joining us today on this virtual meeting. Your attendance shows your commitment to Nevada arts industry, and on behalf of the staff and board of the Nevada Arts Council, I commend and thank you for all you do. At this time, we will proceed to agenda item A2, roll call and introductions. I'll now introduce our panelists. Panelists, please state your name, where you reside, and provide a brief summary of your background and experience. I'll start with Kat Galley. Is that it, Galley?
That is correct. Yes, Kat Galley. I'm from Tonopah. I work for Tonopah Main Street in the UNR Extension office. Doug Ward is.
Hey, Kat, I'm gonna go. This is Tony. I'm gonna get ahead and interrupt you really quickly. Your audio's dropped really low. No, we can't hear you. Yeah. It seems like it went away. Yeah. It was fine when you were talking before, but it definitely is. Maybe try turning your audio off and on again.
How is it now?
Oh, that's better. That's better.
That's better. I don't know what it is. I mean, I have external speakers and I have computer speakers, and for some reason, it used to be good. And now that somebody is at the door, my dogs are going crazy. I apologize. I'm just going to ignore the person, so ignore my dogs.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Lexi. And I'm Kat Galley. I'm from Tonopah. I work for Tonopah Main Street and the UNR Extension here in Tonopah. In a previous life, I was an elementary school teacher and taught art.
This is Jerry again. Thank you. Eric Giles.
This is Eric Giles from the National Assembly State Arts Agency, where I've been the Learning Services Director for the past almost 15 years. I am coming to you from Baltimore, Maryland today.
Wow, Jerry, again, that's great. Thank you. Rachel.
Hello, everyone. This is Rachel Morgan. I am with the Nebraska Arts Council. I oversee the community development grants. So that is our basic operating support, arts projects, and our new creative district program as well. And so I am coming to you from Nebraska, near Omaha.
This is Jerry again. Thank you, Suzanne, Rachel. Okay, Suzanne.
Sorry, Suzanne, this is Tony again. Maybe if you could just unmute yourself, please.
All right. Hi, this is me. I'm a retired person now, but I had a 37-year career in the arts, a good spell of it here in Nevada. And I'm probably best known as the founder and executive director of the Goldwell Open Air Museum and Artist Residency. But I'm also a painter.
This is Jerry. Thank you. And Sierra.
Hello, I'm Sierra Scott. I am the grant specialist for the Western States Arts Federation. That is the regional arts organization, Western States Arts Federation. That's the regional arts organization for the West Coast. And in my spare time, I am a director at my theater company.
This is Jerry again. Thank you very much, Sierra. It's good to see you. Okay, could the Nevada Arts Council staff attending the meeting please introduce yourselves?
Thank you, Jerry. This is Tony Manfredi, Executive Director of the Nevada Arts Council.
Erica Hill, I'm the Community Arts Development Specialist in our Carson City office.
Good morning, everyone. Michelle Patrick, the Community Arts Development Specialist in our Las Vegas office.
Good morning, I'm Stephanie Montgomery. I'm the Grants and Project Analyst in the Carson City office.
And good morning, Harry Ward, Deputy Attorney General.
This is Jerry Sheffick again. Is that everyone?
This is Tony, for the record. Yes, Jerry, that is all staff today.
Great, thank you. It's a great staff. We'll now move on to agenda item B, public comment. A period of public comment will be allowed at the beginning and at the end of the meeting. Members of the public who wish to participate during a public meeting may do so by providing public comment during the 2 designated public comment periods. Members of the public attending may not speak except during the public comment section. Public comments may also be submitted via email to grants@nevadaculture.org. Because of time considerations, the period for public comment by each speaker may be limited to 3 minutes at the discretion of the chair. And speakers are urged to avoid repetition of comments made by previous speakers. Applicants who are attending today do not have an unfair advantage over those who are not in attendance, and the committee will not take public comment regarding any grant applications under consideration. Is there anyone joining today's meeting who wishes to provide public comment?
This is Tony for the record. For any of our attendees, if you wish to provide public comment at this time, please use the raise hand function in Zoom, and I will call you and allow to talk. And again, this is Tony for the record. I see no one on the attendee list wishing and raising their hand at the moment. We have no one in our conference room at the moment. And Stephanie, just confirming if you have received any email messages at the grants email address for public comment.
This is Stephanie, and no, we have not.
Great. Thank you. This is Tony. Jerry, we have no public comment at this time.
This is Jerry. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to agenda item C for possible action. Review of the FY24 project grant for organizations applications. During the meetings today and on August 11th, the panel will discuss and score 28 applications for the FY24 project grant for organizations. Each applicant requested up to $7,000 for a total request of $188,000. The goal of this panel is to score the applications to make recommendations to the Nevada Arts Council Board. Applications are scored according to the following review criteria. First, project planning and management for 30 points total. And community impact and artistic merit for 40 points total. Artistic excellence for 30 points total. The project grant for organizations supports the arts and cultural activities of organizations and public institutions. Funds may be used to support the execution of one arts and culture project or a series of related activities. Examples of eligible projects include art exhibitions, performances, readings, and festivals. All applications received were reviewed by staff for eligibility only, then moved on to the panel for the review process. Prior to reviewing the applications, the panelists completed the Nevada Arts Council panelist orientation and training. Then each panelist reviewed the applications and supplemental materials online and submitted preliminary scores and comments for all applications. As a reminder, panel members are not permitted to enhance any application by offering their personal knowledge of an applicant. No information beyond the application itself may be discussed. Staff may only provide clarification and/or assist panelists in locating information. In accordance with the Nevada Open Meeting Law, panelists may not discuss any applications outside of this public meeting. So please make sure that no discussion regarding applications occurs during breaks, lunch, or after the meeting as we adjourn to each day. All panelists previously received information regarding conflicts of interest. If a panelist stands to profit in some way from the awarding of a grant to any of the applicants, the panelist must refrain from participating in the discussion and scoring of that application. Conflict of interest forms were given to panelists previously and have already been signed and turned in to the Nevada Arts Council staff. Panelists, when I call on you, please state your name for the record and announce if you have any conflict of interest. Kat Galley.
Kat Galley, for the record, I do not have any conflict of interest.
This is Jerry, thank you. Eric Giles.
Eric Giles from NASA. I have no conflicts of interest.
This is Jerry, thank you. Rachel Morgan.
This is Rachel Morgan. I have no conflict of interest.
This is Jerry, thank you. And Suzanne Hackett Morgan.
Suzanne, you're muted.
Got it. I have a conflict of interest with the Goldwell Open Air Museum application. As a founder of the organization, and I did help them with the preparation of this proposal.
Okay, this is Jerry, thank you. When we come to that, when the voting starts, we'll address that. Okay, Sierra.
Sierra Scott, I have a conflict of interest with the Carson City Parks and Recreation Department, application number PGO 2407.
This is Jerry, thank you. Again, we'll address that when we get there. Okay, I will introduce each application by stating the application number, organization name, and a brief description of the project. Then I will ask each panelist to state their name, total preliminary score, and initial comments for that application. After all panelists have spoken, I will open the floor for further discussion on that application. After all comments and discussion, Nevada Arts Council staff will begin the final scoring process. Final scores may be the same as preliminary scores or may differ, as the panel discussion of that application may have informed a change in score. If a panelist has a change in score, they must state the reason for the change. We will take breaks as needed during the meeting, and panelists, please feel free to request a break at any time. Okay.
Jerry, this is Tony again for the record. If at this time Arts Council staff can go ahead and mute and turn off your video, and that way the panelists and the panel chair are the only ones visible on screen. And if there are any issues, we'll just come on as needed. So thank you.
Okay, this is Jerry again for the record. Beginning. This is applicant PGO 24-01, Northern Nevada Bluegrass Association. The 37th Annual Bowers Bluegrass Festival, This 4-day festival presents nationally and locally known bluegrass, old-time, Western swing, and folk music artists at Bowers Mansion Regional Park in Washoe Valley. Okay, if the panelists can offer their score and their comments, we'll start with Kat Galley.
401, I gave a preliminary score. Oh, sorry, Kat Galley for the record. I gave a preliminary score of 90. And my comment was that I felt that the organization's audience, as shown in past survey results, and the marketing to that audience needs to align better. I would recommend that they directly contact schools and use social media, and I would like to see surveys provided in multiple ways.
Thank you, Kat. This is Jerry. Next, Eric, could you offer your score and comments, please?
Certainly. This is Eric Giles for applicant PG 02401. I gave a preliminary score of 93. Similar to Kat, I noticed that with their survey and their demographic, it skews heavily towards 55 plus and within 40 miles of their event. And so it looks to me like they may need to start targeting different audiences and, targeting their outreach a little bit to try and reach families within the 20 to 50 year age range and maybe outside of that 40-mile radius.
This is Jerry for the record. Thank you very much. Rachel, could you offer your score and comments?
This is Rachel Morgan. I gave a total score of 80. Some of my comments are, I really like how the biographies were laid out. It was very easy and clear to read as a panelist, which I appreciated quite a bit. In the budget was very easy to read and very well laid out, but there were no expenses for travel. So I was curious if those are maybe wrapped into the artist fees, but if so, maybe some of that additional clarification where there's the room for that would be helpful as a panelist to see that. I do understand that word of mouth is their best marketing strategy, but I'm curious how they know that. Is it just a thing where you say you know it? I would have liked to seen that backed up by something. We do a survey, and from those results, we learned this. So I really wanted to see that. I also wanted to know more about the notables. I thought it was a nice addition to the event, but I was curious how they're integrated. Are they part of the main stage? And if so, talk about that, really talk that up, because I thought it was a really great aspect of the event, and I really wanted to know more about it. And then I did like the work samples, but I would have liked more video links rather than the still photos, just to get a better sense of that artistic quality of the groups that are involved. And those are my comments.
This is Jerry. Thank you very much. Suzanne, could you offer your score and comments?
I sure can. Let's see if I'm unmuted. Am I unmuted? Yay. My initial score was 99, and my comments were that this is right up there with Elko's Cowboy Poetry Gathering in terms of quality and impact. I thought they had excellent performance, staging, and sound, and I'd never even heard of this festival before after being here for 30 years. So maybe their marketing does need some help.
This is Jerry. Thank you, Suzanne. And Sierra, your comments and score.
Sierra Scott, my preliminary score was 93. I echo the things the other panelists are saying about the surveys. I do like that they are implementing changes based on participant feedback, and they noted some of those specific examples in the application. I do think with the surveys that they are conducting, that they should have some more specific demographic information for question number 13. If you are doing that survey, and I'll be saying this a lot probably today, but that question, I don't love seeing just the demographics of the entire city or the entire county that they're in. They should have more targeted demographic information, especially if this is a recurring event. I do love the bluegrass petting zoo for kids. The work samples I thought were strong, and but I would have liked to see a little bit more diversity in the performers that they're bringing in. That may exist, but I didn't see it in the application.
Mrs. Jerry, thank you very much. Okay, after hearing everyone's, is there any further discussion on this application? Okay, then would Arts Council staff, would you begin the final scoring process, please?
This is Tony. I will call up our score sheets now. 1 second. Is everyone able to see the score sheet on the screen? Okay. So I will ask you for your final scores, and I'll begin with Suzanne. And Suzanne, if you can go ahead and unmute, please. This is Tony. If you can unmute and go ahead and give me your score. Lower left-hand corner.
No, got it.
Nope.
Hey man, buy me a new computer. It's just, brother.
Okay, Suzanne. So your score, if you can go ahead and give me your score.
99.
Okay. And Kat.
90.
Okay. And Rachel.
80.
All right. And Sierra.
Sierra Scott, my preliminary score was 93, and after the discussion, I'm going to bring it down to 91 based on the feedback about the outreach to younger demographics, and I had missed that that kind of 50 plus demographic that Eric and Kat had brought up. So 91.
Great. Thank you, Sierra. This is Tony. Eric, your score.
This is Eric Giles. I'm going to maintain my score of 93.
Okay. So again, this is Tony Manfredi for application PGO 24-01 Northern Nevada Bluegrass. We have final scores from Suzanne at 99, Kat at 90, Rachel at 80, Sierra 91, Eric at 93 for a final average score of 90.6. And Jerry, back to you.
This is Jerry. Thank you, Tony and everyone. I will getting into the groove, I guess. Moving on to applicant PGO 24-03 Virtual Arts. The New Play Festival will take place on Zoom over the course of two weekends in late February, early March of 2024, and feature around 10 playwrights with diverse voices, both from Nevada and around the country. We're calling on you for your comments and score. Let's start with Eric. Could you offer your score and comments, please?
Certainly. This is Eric Giles. My preliminary score is 83. I think virtual programming is definitely, as they mentioned, something that's going to keep going in the future. And I think their timeline and planning sounds spot on from my experience with virtual events. Their evaluation process, however, I think is very weak when it comes to their audience. I think the internal critiquing and debriefing are great, but they don't have a good sense of what their audience is actually thinking, what their audience experience is, or audience demographics. And I think that needs to be a priority thing going forward. As kind of reverberates later on with their DEI. They have great aspirations and thought process with their DEI statement, but how are they measuring the demographics? How are they implementing that? How are they planning on maintaining or increasing diversity and inclusion moving forward? I just didn't see any concrete steps or anything as how they're defining diversity and inclusion when it comes to their virtual event.
Well, this is Jerry. Thank you very much. Rachel, could you offer your score and comments, please?
This is Rachel Morgan. My total score was 81. I thought it was really interesting to see that this came out of the pandemic. I think a lot of times we hear things that, oh, we tried that and then we went back. So I really enjoyed seeing that this came out of the pandemic. I like that there's a variety of plays. There's both one act and full length, which makes it much more accessible for those both watching and for the playwrights. The timeline was very sparse. I felt like there was nothing about evaluations in the timeline, and there's only one line about tech. And as this is a very virtual, totally virtual project, that concerned me that I think there really needs to be more in there, and they're just not stating it. I was also confused by the in-kind totals in the budget. So there's wording in there that the exec committee donates their services, but the in-line, the in-kind line was 1,300. But if the exec committee donates 500 per month, like the numbers just didn't add up for me, and I wasn't quite sure what I was missing. So if this could be made more clear, or in that additional information line, if they could clarify that, it would be really helpful. I totally agree about Eric's comments on the DEI. The narrative was lovely, but there's really not anything there to really back it up. And then I thought the playwright bios were pretty sparse, and I didn't know if this was a common thing, but I left wanting to know a lot more about the playwrights. I didn't really feel like I learned a lot from them. But I did enjoy the work samples. It really helped the project take shape in my mind. And so I did appreciate those. And those are my comments.
This is Jerry. Thank you very much. Suzanne, could you offer your comments and score, please?
Sure, I will. We're on, let's see.
24.
Okay, well, I had a preliminary score of 89. I thought their planning was very clear and thorough. And I can't tell you how many times I had to spell thorough to make that comment come through. I'm just saying, okay? I thought the artistic documentation really showed how effective the Zoom platform could be for theatrical presentations, not gimmicky, but just another proscenium, which I thought was quite nice, a nice thing for me to say. So based on what you presented, I think the festival will grow and improve over the next year. I didn't feel the need to kind of screw down on them for specifics because they're vanguards, and I appreciate what they're doing.
Okay, this is Jerry.
Gotcha, Jerry.
This is Jerry. Thank you, Suzanne, very much. Sierra, could we get your score and comments, please?
Sierra Scott, my preliminary score is 81. And Really, I just echo what the other panelists said at this point. Same points that I had written down about the evaluation, missing an opportunity to collect quantitative hard data in a survey if all the audience is already online and on their computers. I thought the DEI statement was vague, and I did like the work samples. So really just echoing what everyone else has already said.
This is Jerry. Thank you, Sierra, very much. Kat, could we get your score and comments?
My preliminary score was 98. I had the same criticism that for an online event, I would have expected an online survey afterwards to gather way more. You already have your audience there. I echo every criticism, so I'm actually surprised that mine was 98. I looked at my original chart to make sure I didn't put the numbers wrong, but I did put 98. But I have the same criticism in my comments that everybody else had.
All right, this is Jerry again. Thank you, each of you. Now, after hearing everyone, is there any further discussion or comments on this application? Okay, then Arts Council staff, could you begin the final scoring process, please?
Thank you, Jerry. This is Tony. We are going to do final scoring for PGO 24-03 virtual arts. I will begin with Kat. And your preliminary score was?
It was 98, and I would like to change it to 88.
Okay.
Because of the stuff that was said before about, really not addressing the audience and how you're getting your feedback and how you're addressing equity and how you're gathering your data to make that all fit what you're saying you're doing.
Thank you. Rachel, your preliminary score?
81.
Okay. And any adjustments or changes there?
No.
Okay, thank you. Sierra. So you have a preliminary score of 81.
Sierra Scott, and I'm going to stick with my preliminary score. My final score is 81.
Thank you, Sierra. And Eric.
My preliminary score was 83, and I'm actually going to adjust that down to 80, based off of what Rachel brought up regarding the budget and some of the tech issues, tech missing from there, because those are both confusing and necessary.
Thank you, Eric. This is Tony. Suzanne, your preliminary score and final score, please.
Heck, I don't know. Let's see, 89.
And this is Tony and Suzanne. That is your final score?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. So final scores for PGO 24-03 virtual arts. Suzanne, 89. Kat, 88. Rachel, 81. Sierra, 81. Eric, 80. For a final score of 83.8. And Jerry, this is Tony. Back to you.
This is Jerry. Thank you very much. Moving on to applicant. The next applicant is PGO 24-04, the Asylum Theater. The Asylum West project is dedicated to the development and premiere of international plays translated into English, an international collaboration between the Asylum Theater in Las Vegas and Barron's Court Theater in London, UK. Let's start. Rachel, could you offer your thoughts and your score, please?
This is Rachel Morgan. I gave it a preliminary score of 68. The place selected is incredibly moving, and they've done a great job describing the project, but it took me until section B to figure out what language it was what the original language was, and what it was translated from, which then made me question, is it only Spanish plays that they translate? Do they pick a different language? There was a lot that kind of was left undescribed there, if there's other languages that are involved in other projects. The timeline was very sparse. It didn't include any mention of marketing, evaluation, or planning in that timeline. I would have liked to have seen more information about the survey. They do mention one, but I don't know what it is that they ask or what it is they're trying to find out from that survey. And this didn't impact my score. I was just curious why they didn't devote the entire grant award to artist fees, since they have $10,000 in artist fees in the budget, which the grant would have covered. I was really happy to see insurance included in the budget, though, as sometimes I feel like that's something that can get overlooked. So I was really happy to see that included. It would have strengthened the project to see more specific examples of partnerships, of outreach, publicity. They state in the application that the works translated from Spanish are particularly empowering for the Latinx population, but I'm not understanding how that population finds out about the plays and about the project. Let's see. I did see that ASL interpreters are hired for the performance. I was curious if that's for specific performances, if they set aside one that is ASL interpreted, or if that is all of them. It would have been nice to know that. I really wanted more out of the last section. It's just left so much up for us to assume things. I didn't understand how the artists are chosen or how the pieces are chosen, or their community meetings that happen. Are there auditions? I'm assuming there's auditions, but it's not clear. So I really left wanting to know a lot more about the artists that are involved in the project. But the marketing materials that they uploaded were very nice. I did appreciate those a lot. Very, very professional. And those are my comments.
This is Jerry. Thank you very much. Suzanne, your score and comments, please.
I think I scored, let's see, an 81. And I guess I was moved by their mission to do translation of plays and bring them to Las Vegas in America. I thought that was pretty unique. I guess another thing I appreciated about this proposal is that they posited Las Vegas on a worldwide stage, which we are, and we don't really deal with that very often. And so there is something to me important about the work that they're doing to bring that to the forefront. As for the other things my panelists have brought up, I agree with you. I guess my head just wasn't in that kind of space to look at it that way. You know, I was appreciating what they were doing artistically this time.
Okay, this is Jerry. Thank you very much.
Okay.
This is great. Sierra, could we get your score and comments, please?
Sierra Scott, my preliminary score was 93. I did think that the project description was thorough. I did get a good understanding of what they were doing. I would have liked to see more specific demographic information about their audiences and artists. Again, Las Vegas as a whole was not sufficient for this project. And because of the component from other countries, there's a lot, I think, of demographic data to dig into there that we just really missed. I thought the work samples were moving, and the partnership with the theater in Ukraine was something I'd never seen before, especially, you know, them doing the work during a bombing was really, really moving. That's all.
Well, this is Jerry. Thank you very much. Kat, your score and comments.
Kat Galley, my preliminary score was 83, echoing some of the comments that were made before. And I do want to interject, I really appreciate Rachel's detailed responses. This is the first time I'm on a review panel, And a lot of what Rachel says, I did find difficult to work through some of those applications as far as, you know, biographies and how they were provided, or some of the, you know, some videos were really great and then others weren't. So I really appreciate her feedback, because I was having the same difficulties and was mostly reviewing it based on the questions that we were provided under those sections. So it's eye-opening to me that some of those things that I was lacking or also noticing, I could have scored on. I didn't want to be too picky, but man, some of them were really hard to read.
This is Jerry again. Thank you very much. Eric, your score and comments, please.
This is Eric Giles, and my preliminary score is 97, and I'm honestly looking at it thinking, why is that 97? Because I have many of the same comments, and I'm wondering if there's some user error on my part in the scoring mechanism, because I think I would have scored this lower for many of the reasons that have been stated before. But I also would have loved to see an example of your evaluation sample results. I think anything you can give us related to any evaluation you've done or samples you've done, samples of any of that work would be helpful in an application. I think that's all I have to add to what my other panelists have said.
This is Jerry. Thank you very much. Okay, I think that's everyone. Is there any further comment or discussion on this application? Okay, then staff, Arts Council staff, could you then move on to the final scoring?
This is Tony. We will go ahead and begin the final scoring for PGO 24-04, the Asylum Theater. Rachel, we will begin the scoring with you. If you could give your preliminary score and if you're making any adjustments, please.
My preliminary score was 68. And I would bring it up to a 73 due to the unique nature of the work that they're doing with the UK and that collaboration that's very unique.
Thank you. This is Tony. Sierra, your preliminary score and any adjustments.
Sierra Scott, my preliminary score was 93, and I'm going to bring that down to a 91, bringing points down in both the artistic excellence and merit section and the community impacts, and the project planning section, specifically about the selection of artists and actors was missing, which Rachel brought up, and the timeline was a little bit more vague than I had initially read.
Thank you, Sierra. This is Tony. Eric, your preliminary score and any adjustments.
My preliminary score was 97, and I am going to bring that down to close to 90. For me, the same reasons that Sierra and Rachel have already brought up regarding some of the vagueness, parts left out, and difficulty kind of making my way and understanding some of the things that were going on there.
Thank you, Eric. This is Tony again. Suzanne, your preliminary score and any adjustments. And this is Tony. Suzanne, you are muted.
Okay, 81, and I'm sticking with it.
Thank you, Suzanne. This is Tony. Kat, your preliminary score and any adjustments.
The preliminary was 83, and I'm also sticking with it. And from a formatting, you need to make my score on 03, you need to make that blue because I changed that scoring.
Oh, above, correct?
Yes.
Gotcha. Yes. Thank you. Okay, final scores for PGO 24-04, the Asylum Theater. Suzanne, 81, Kat, 83, Rachel, 73, Sierra, 91, Eric, 90, for a final average score of 83.6. And Jerry, back to you.
This is Jerry. Thank you very much. Okay, applicant PGO 24-05, Nevada Artist Co-op Gallery. aims to discover and open their doors to new and emerging artists in their community. Sierra, could we ask you your score and comments, please?
Sierra Scott, my preliminary score was 70, but I am not quite sure about this one. I really wanted to get the other panelists' input on this one. It struck me as a bit inequitable or perhaps condescending about how they described this project, saying that we're going to take these artists that are not recognized by the artistic community and mentor them and bring them up and then videotape the whole process. It seemed like they weren't describing the artists that they were bringing in as artists in their own right with, value and things to, it wasn't a collaborative description. And again, this might just be the verbiage that they use, but there was something about it that just gave me pause, that it wasn't that they might not be authentically supporting or valuing these new artists and what they could bring in an equitable way. I thought videotaping the process for the media felt like it could have been a bit exploitative of these artists. I think, they said they might be targeting veterans or teens. I think that maybe teens, this makes sense for, because, you're working with youth, you're educating them, you're bringing them up to show in a gallery. But if you're looking at a historically underserved or marginalized community like veterans, then speaking about bringing those veterans up in this way, I think does not, something about it just struck me a little bit off. Number 18, they described individuals with disabilities as special needs, which is not the current suggested verbiage for that. And how they describe the artistic excellence, saying they would only select those who demonstrate a high degree of technical skill and an artistic sensibility that impresses the majority of our artists. I just wasn't sure that allowed for artists who are not classically trained or folk artists, or I just felt there was a lens of DEI that was missing in general. But again, this is just, I'm really curious to hear what the other panelists thought about this project in general.
Mrs. Jerry, thank you very much. Suzanne, your score and comments, please.
Sure. My initial score was a 70. And I said, I think that the project has merit, but it's just sort of a mess. I mean, it's the methodology was really thin on how and who will be selected and mentored. Veterans and youth are pretty broad categories. I just felt like they didn't really know what they were quite going after here. So I'm in a complete agreement with Sierra. So 70 is where I'm at.
This is Jerry. Thank you very much. Rachel, could we get your score and comments, please?
This is Rachel Morgan. So my preliminary score was 60, and it really echoes, my comments really echo what Sierra and Suzanne have brought up. I think there's a lot of ideas in the application and not a lot of confirmed things that are happening. For instance, they think that PBS might be interested in the project, but I don't think that's confirmed. It didn't come across in the application that it was. And then I wanted to just caution, there was a statement in the second section saying that artists are naturally inclusive. That's not always the case. And so you have to, I would just caution about some blanket statements like that. We are all people. We are all different in the way that we work. So you can't just assume that a person has a certain mindset because of what they do. So I would just caution about that. And I had the same concern about the youth and veterans, and it also didn't really seem clear throughout the application. So it was mentioned at the beginning and then at the end, but it was never quite clear who they were going to be working with. And also the selection criteria that was going to be used to choose the artists. I think maybe having that selection criteria might help the applicant have a more defined idea of who they're working with, and then could have written the application much more clear, and we would have understood it a little bit better. And that is my comments.
This is Jerry. Thank you very much. Eric, could we get your score and comment, please?
Certainly, this is Eric Giles. My preliminary score was 71. For many of the reasons that have already been brought up, I will also mention that it was missing information on the demographics of their region and community, which it made it really hard to, not only did they not say a lot about DEI in there, but who are you aiming for? What are your demographics? How do you know you're being more diverse? How do you know you're being more inclusive? How are you reaching into diverse communities for applicants and visitors? So I had all these questions arise on top of everything else that was already mentioned.
This is Jerry again. Thank you very much. Kat, your score and comments, please.
This is going to be interesting. Kat Gowdy, my preliminary was 98. A lot of what everyone else said as negative, I read as positive, because I thought the fact that they were so open to just including anyone who wanted to work with them, I read as positive, instead of going into the process as, we already know who we're going to work with, we already have 5 out of 10 selected, or they've already contacted us or something. I thought the fact that they left it broad was to me a positive, to be able to, they're going to try to reach out to veterans, they're going to try to reach out to youth, but if somebody else wants to work with them, great. And I felt like that video aspect that other people were criticizing as exploiting was more of a, well, now somebody else might be able to watch this process and learn from it. And also, because I think artists and showing art is, at least from my experience, a lot of people don't know how to show their art, or even don't want to even tell anybody they're creating art, don't want to exhibit it, don't think they're good enough to exhibit it. So I was reading all of that as so positive. So it's very interesting. The thing that rubbed me the wrong way was, under the demographic, it was said that they're reaching this broader community, including Fernie, Fallon, and Dayton, and because these communities don't have galleries, so the communities don't have access to that kind of work, and all 3 of them have galleries. So that rubbed me the wrong way, because I am from one of those small towns, not one of those 3, but I am one of those small towns where people always have prejudice as to what we don't have. And
Kat, this is Tony Manfredi. Just being cautious here. Just please remember to keep your remarks to what's in the application versus any other information, especially regarding galleries and the like. Thank you.
Which I understand that I'm not supposed to use my prior knowledge for evaluation, but if they're saying that's their demographic, and I know that it's not the demographic, so I feel like then in that case, then my score is actually going to be lower, because if they're saying those communities will be exhibiting because they have no other opportunity, I can't not factor that in. That's a lie. That's data that's unsubstantiated.
Okay, this is Jerry. Thank you. I think that's everyone. Okay, is there any further discussion on this applicant? Okay, then Arts Council staff, could you move to the final scoring, please?
This is Tony. We will move to final scoring for PGO 24-05 Nevada Co-op Gallery. And Sierra, I will begin with you. Your preliminary and final scores, please.
Sierra Scott, my preliminary score was 70, and I'm going to stick with it.
Thank you, Sierra. This is Tony. Eric, your preliminary score and any adjustments.
This is Eric Giles. My preliminary score was 71, and I'll be sticking with that.
Thank you, Eric. Suzanne, your preliminary score and any adjustments?
My preliminary score was 70 and I'm sticking with it.
Thank you. Kat, your preliminary score and any adjustments?
So I cannot factor in that I know that those three communities that they specifically named have galleries. Is that correct?
I think it's a matter of going with what's on the, what's on the, in the application. And again, keeping your prior knowledge of the applicant out of that regard.
It's not the knowledge of the applicant, it's the knowledge of other communities that they're describing as their target demographic that I'm using, because I know they're wrong on their target demographic. So it's like somebody using incorrect census data and describing their population percentages. If I know they're using incorrect percentages because I've seen the data, can I factor that in?
Yeah, I think based on the preliminary, based on the scores in the conversation that you've heard from the panelists and any adjustments in that way, if you feel like you need to make an adjustment, you may do so.
If I can't use my knowledge that those three communities have galleries, then my scoring is actually 100.
Your scoring will stay then? I'm sorry, your audio was
It's gonna be 100.
You're gonna raise the score to 100?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, and Rachel, your scores, please.
My preliminary score was 60, and I'm going to keep it at 60.
Okay, so final scores for PGO 24-05 Nevada Artists Co-op Gallery: Suzanne 70, Kat 100, Rachel 60, Sierra 70, and Eric 71, for a final score of 74.2. And Jerry, back to you.
This is Jerry. Thank you very much. Our next applicant, PGO 24-06, High Desert Harmony Chorus. High Desert Holidays performance with seasonal, secular, and non-secular popular music selections spanning multiple cultures and including collaborations with local school choruses, dance companies, quartets, and others. Kat, could we start with you, your score and comments, please?
Kat Galley, I gave this applicant a score of 100. I thought they gave very detailed answers. I love that they're involving the schools and that they have, things like a sign language interpreter at their event. So I felt they were hitting all the questions that I was evaluating.
Thank you. This is Jerry. Eric, could we get your score and comments, please?
All right, it's Eric Giles. I thought this was an excellent application. I was very pleased with it. I gave it a score of 99. I am curious to learn a little bit more about how they're promoting and doing outreach to a diverse audience. I thought they had a lot of good things to say. I really appreciated within their DEI how they have a standard they're set to, and they make sure everything goes through that. So overall, this is a really strong application, in my opinion.
This is Jerry. Thank you. Rachel, could we get your score and comments, please?
This is Rachel Morgan. My preliminary score was 94. I thought this was a really nice application. There was additional descriptions for budget items. So anything that was a little questionable, they were able to put that in there, which was incredibly helpful as a panelist. I did have a question in the second section, section B. There was a phrase they used, lowering the bar to engagement, that I wasn't quite sure what they meant by that. Were they lowering barriers, or were they lowering the expectations of engagement? I just wasn't quite sure what they meant by that. So maybe a little bit more clarification if they do another project grant. I thought the information about the SAT method was incredibly interesting. I hadn't heard of that before, and I think it's a great tool to be aware of. There was a selection criteria included, but there was a fee on the selection criteria, and I wasn't quite sure what that meant either. So maybe some clarification there. And the work samples, the videos were great. And I really appreciated those as well. And those are my comments.
This is Jerry. Thank you very much. Suzanne, your comment and score, please.
Yeah, sure. I think my score was 86. And I think what I really liked about this application was this guest chorus concept. You know, the idea of bringing together just regular folks and bringing them into the choral environment to learn how to sing together. I mean, what's better than getting people together to sing? I mean, that's pretty awesome. I also appreciated that they emphasized in their program the educational nature of learning how to sing. And I mean, that was pretty impressive, you know. I mean, that's pretty worthwhile for a community group to share, you know.
Okay, this is Jerry. Thank you very much. Sierra, your scoring comments, please.
This is Sierra. I echo a lot of those same comments about the budget and that SAI song assessment tool, really interesting. I love when people include specific metrics. Our goal is to attract more than 400 attendees, which would exceed our 2022 attendance by 50 people. I really like seeing that. I like seeing the survey results in the supporting material. Again, the budget breakdown was really helpful. And I had dinged them for, again, not, you know, including demographics just for the entire city of Reno. However, then in number 14, they followed up with, this year we aim to capture specific audience metrics in terms of the above categories to identify gaps. So that's really thoughtful planning for the future. And I did think their DEI answer was really thoughtful, and I appreciated the inclusion of non-binary and trans folks.
This is Jerry. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. And my preliminary score was 90.
Okay. Very important. All right. After everyone's offered their comments, is any further discussion and comments on this applicant? Okay, then can we ask the staff to move on to the final scoring?
This is Tony. We'll go ahead and move on for final scoring for PGO 24-06, High Desert Harmony Chorus. Eric, I will begin with you. Your preliminary and final score, please.
This is Eric Giles. My preliminary score was 99, and I'm going to keep that score.
Thank you, Eric. Again, this is Tony. Suzanne, your preliminary and final score, please.
It was 86.
Great. And you're staying with that. That's your final
Yes.
score.
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much. Kat, your final score, please.
Final score was 100, and I'm sticking with it.
Great. Thank you very much.
Preliminary was 100, sorry, and my final was also 100.
Okay. Rachel, your,
Oh, sorry.
go ahead.
This is Rachel. Preliminary score was 94, and I will stay at 94.
Thank you. And Sierra.
So Sierra, my preliminary score was 90, but I'm going to raise it to 95 because in reviewing my comments, I actually didn't have any negative comments. I could have been a little bit more thorough, but overall, I think I wanted to raise their scores in both planning and community impact.
Thank you. Final scores for PGO 24-06 High Desert Harmony Chorus. Suzanne 86, Kat 100, Rachel 94, Sierra 95, Eric 99, for a final average score of 94.8. Jerry, we're ready with the next applicant.
This is Jerry. Thank you very much. Moving on now. applicant PGO 24-07, Carson City Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Department. Carson City Murals and Music Festival, a 3-day festival featuring local, national, and international mural artists, concerts, and interactive events. Rachel, could we start with you and your score and comments, please?
This is Sierra for the record. This is my conflict of interest, so I'm going to go ahead and turn my video and audio off.
Thank you.
This is Rachel Morgan. My preliminary score was 90. They are planning on creating at least 19 new murals, which I thought was quite incredible. There's a very strong public-private partnership. And I love the fact that Carson City has a public art policy. That's one of the things Nebraska towns are lacking. So I was really excited by that. I thought that was great. It's a big event with a lot of moving parts. So the timeline is a nice overview. It does lack detail. So it might be something that maybe could kind of been beefed up a little bit, but there is evaluation and marketing in the timeline, which I was really happy to see. It wasn't clear how they're choosing in the timeline the artists who are not local. The others were in the timeline. Yeah, I was just curious how that all fits together, since they did focus on the local artists, call for artists. The key personnel are well qualified. The fact that the city is contributing a large sum of money shows a big commitment to this project. I understand that the artists are reducing their fees, but I do think there's sometimes a fine line between artists donating to a cause and them not getting paid for their work. So just make sure, I would say to the applicant, that you're planning an event that is sustainable by paying your artists, and it's something that artists do want to be a part of in the long term. So I would just caution on that. I would like to know more about this collaboration with the Boys and Girls Club. It's mentioned in section B, but I don't really know a lot about it. And I think that could be a really incredible partnership. So I would really strongly encourage the applicant to kind of tell us a little bit more about that in future applications. I thought the work samples were really great. It would strengthen the application, though, to show the selection criteria, or if there's a rubric, or how they're selecting the artists. It says that that Eric Brooks was selected based on personal experience, but it might be really helpful to have something documented that would help the festival in future years when they're selecting artists, to have some sort of criteria to select their artists by. And that is my comments.
Great, thank you very much. This is Jerry. Suzanne, can we ask for your score and comments, please? You might be muted.
How's that?
Better.
Okay. All right, I gave this application initial score of 81. And I guess what I was not impressed about was I wanted to see some artistic samples from the proposed muralist. I mean, the diversity looks good on paper, but how can we judge what they're going to do if we don't have any example of what they do? So I thought photos of proposed locations would have helped. I appreciated the good coalitions of organizations involved, and I think the project personnel is well qualified. I'm sure it'll be successful, but it just was a little light for me, a little light.
Okay, this is Jerry. Thank you very much. Eric, could we get your score and comments, please?
Certainly. This is Eric. Initial score is a 99. I thought this was a great application. Most of what I would comment has been said, but one thing I really want to highlight that I think was explained well was how collaborative this is and how community centered this is. Just having an event well as mural paintings provides not only an event that's community building, but then reminders of that event throughout. And I thought they did a really good job of kind of like showing that through this and talking about how collaborative it is and how it's artists working with business owners and, you know, talking about the factors of that. So it was well thought out for a big partnership and a big event. And it just seems like it's something that's really good for this community.
This is Jerry. Thank you, Eric. Kat, could we get your score and comments, please?
My preliminary score was 88. I felt like for a one-time event, this is a really high budget. I can't tell if it's going to be a continuation, like this event is going to happen again, maybe next year or in 2 years or in 5 years. So I felt like, okay, is 19 murals the number because that's how many buildings you have, or is it because you have 80 building owners that are willing to put a mural on their building, and that's why you're doing 19 because you're going to do this again. I just felt like, okay, with all the buy-in from the community, and as much as I like that it's positive from a financial standpoint, I felt like, okay, this could have been easily a project of 18 murals and you wouldn't have needed grant funds. So I was a little confused as to why, for a project of over $300,000, grant funds were needed. I agreed with Rachel on if you're asking artists to donate, that's always an iffy subject because you know, they're always underpaid as it is for their time and their supplies, and then to ask them to reduce their costs to participate in this, I didn't think that was a positive. It was shown as a match, and I didn't like that. And for me, some of the impact was more geared towards the long-term impact for the community of having murals, which I love murals. But I wanted to see more of the impact of what are people experiencing during the event and what are they getting out of the event itself versus the long-term effect of what those murals will do for the community.
This is Jerry. Thank you very much. Okay, is there any further discussion or comments on this applicant? Okay, then moving on to the final scoring. Tony?
Thank you, Jerry. This is Tony. We will begin final scoring for PGO 24-07, Carson City Parks, Recreation and Open Space Department. Please note that Sierra Scott has a conflict of interest with this applicant and her is not scoring nor voting in this application. So we will begin with Suzanne Hackett Morgan, please.
81.
Thank you, Suzanne. Kat. Kat, your score, please.
Oh, sorry, I must have muted myself too quickly. 88.
88. Thank you. Rachel, your score, please.
Preliminary was 90 and I'm staying at 90.
Thank you, Rachel. And Eric, your score, please.
My preliminary was 99, but I'm going to adjust that down to 97 based off of the comments made about artists donating their work and as well as some of the selection process.
Thank you, Eric. This is Tony. Final scores for PGO 24-07, Carson City Parks, Recreation and Open Space Department. Suzanne, 81, Kat, 88, Rachel, 90, Eric, 97, for a final score of 89 even. And Jerry, I think at this time, if we could go ahead and take a break So others can do a little restroom break and check in. And if you are good with that, a 10-minute or 15-minute break, whichever you think is best.
Well, this is Jerry. Yes, it'd be good to take a little break now. How about we reconvene at 11 o'clock?
That sounds great.
That'd be all right with everyone?
Yep.
Okay, back at 11.
Come on, you wanna go outside? Come on.
This is Jerry. Are we ready to begin?
Hi, Jerry, this is Tony. Just want to, looks like we're waiting on, and it looks like we might have lost Eric. So waiting for him to check back in and then get Suzanne's audio and video up.
I'm here, Tony.
Oh, you're right there. You're just right in the middle of the screen. Thanks, Eric.
Best place to hide is in plain sight, Tony.
I know. I think you're right. It's great. One reminder for everyone on the call. Please, the panelists, please don't use the chat function. If you need anything, just please voice it. If you need to make an adjustment, if you need to take a break, everything, we just want to make sure that that is all open and everyone, there's nothing going on in the chat other than Stephanie is relaying which application we're currently reviewing in the chat for all, both panelists and attendees. So with that, Suzanne, are we able to, I don't know if she's back yet? Hang tight, we will see if we can get her back on.
I'm back.
Okay, Jerry, this is Tony. We are good to go.
This is Jerry for the record. Okay, going on now to PGO 24-08, IAF Inc. Incorporated, Indigenous AF. This exhibition addresses the complexity of identity and suggests that anyone can be an hijo de su, regardless of gender, identity, or expression. Let's begin with Sierra. Could you offer your score and comments, please?
This is Sierra. My initial score was 100. I thought this was a beautiful and thoughtful concept with clear collaboration and a commitment to showcasing a diverse range of artists. I thought the planning was very strong. There's a clear timeline. Throughout the application, I really appreciated the specific to Nevada dialogue within the Latinx community here. It wasn't just broad, it was really targeted to the state and to the specific needs of the community in our state. That there's a strong evaluation plan with many different methods to gather data. They are matching with all in kind, which shows it's kind of a grassroots organization that is has a lot of volunteer hours and donated facility space, which shows community partnerships and support. They definitely had a strong connection to and understanding of the community that they're serving. And I thought the accessibility plan was really strong and demonstrated a thoughtful commitment to access. And then finally, I thought the work samples showed a really diverse array of styles and really strengthened the application.
This is Jerry. Thank you. Suzanne, can we get your comments and score?
Yeah, my score was 92. I thought this was an excellent application and kind of groundbreaking on many levels. I guess what really struck me was that this is a true Northern and Southern Nevada exhibition, which is something I feel is not done often enough, in my humble opinion. The personnel is very good. Their enthusiasm shows through. As Sierra said, there were excellent attention to detail in this proposal. So I'm a big fan.
This is Jerry. Thank you, Suzanne. Rachel, your score and comments, please.
This is Rachel Morgan. My preliminary score was 89. I also thought this was a nice application. I liked that in the timeline, they talked about interviews being scheduled to accommodate the artist schedules, which I thought was really thoughtful. Very nice. I would have liked to have seen some details about marketing or evaluations included in that timeline. They also talked about receptions later on, but they weren't included in the timeline. So that might have helped give some more clarity there. They have tracking methods. The tracking methods didn't always go together with the goals. For instance, they're capturing visitor counts, but there wasn't a goal as to how many visitors they wanted. So it might be something to take a look at what you're capturing and see what your goals are related to that. What is it that you're trying to hit with those? I would have liked a little bit more information about the artist fees. There's a flat $4,000 in the artist fees in the budget, but there's 16 artists. And so I was assuming that meant that each artist got $250, but that wasn't quite clear. That wasn't exactly spelled out. So I kind of had to assume things. So it would really help to kind of give a breakdown or explain how that 4,000 is broken out for the artist fees. The application clearly states that this could serve as a model, so I highly encourage them to document the process as they go through it, because I think this could serve as a great model. And so having that documentation that they can go back to or share with other organizations could be really, really helpful in the future. And I think this is a really important project. Those are my comments.
This is Jerry. Thank you. Eric, could we get your score and comments?
Certainly. This is Eric Giles. My preliminary score is a 98. For me, the same reasons that everyone has brought up. I did want to mention the artist fees as well, because I was seeing, as was mentioned, $4,000 artist fees, but then later on they were talking about artists, donating for and providing their own materials, and they were using that as part of the in-kind. And so it's kind of this confusion. It's like, well, why wasn't that $1,600 included somewhere else? Or are you double using this in two different areas where they're expected to cover their materials through their artist fee, but now you're also seeing it as, there was confusion around that that I think could have been clarified a bit. And they did mention receptions later on. And so I noticed they only had $500 targeted for reception food. And having, put together a lot of receptions in my time, $500 is really low. So they probably should have thought about bump that number up a little bit. And I just think that that might be a bit low, depending, of course, upon how many people they're expecting to attract to this and how many receptions they'll be having afterwards.
Okay, this is Jerry. Thank you. And Kat, could we get your score and comments?
I gave it 100 for the same reasons that Sierra had mentioned. And I do have to admit that I did overlook that portion that the artists were donating materials. So that's obviously one of the things that I had dinged people beforehand. So I'm glad that that was pointed out by the other panelists.
This is Jerry. Thank you. Okay. Is there any other comments or discussion on this applicant? No? Okay. Tony, could we move on to the scoring, final scoring?
Thank you, Jerry. This is Tony. We will begin final scoring for PGO 24-08 IAF Indigenous AF. We'll begin with Kat. Your score, please.
My preliminary score was 100, and I would like to adjust that down to 98 based on the fact that artists are asked to commit funds on their own.
Thank you, Kat. Rachel, your score, please.
Preliminary score of 89, and I'd like to keep it there.
Thank you, Rachel. Sierra, your score, please.
This is Sierra. My preliminary score was 100 and I'm going to keep it there.
Thank you, Sierra. Eric, your score.
My preliminary score is 98, and I'm going to keep it there.
Thank you, Eric. And Suzanne.
$92.
Great. Okay, final scores for PGO 24-08 IAF Inc. Indigenous AF. Suzanne, 92, Kat, 98, Rachel, 89, Sierra, 100, Eric, 100, for a final average score of 95.4.
Tony, this is Jerry. I have Eric with 98 and not 100.
My apologies if I said 100. Let me go ahead and read these again. Final scores for PGO 24-08 IAF Inc. Indigenous AF, Suzanne, 92, Kat, 98, Rachel, 89, Sierra, 100, Eric, 98, for a final average score of 95.4.
Okay, this is Jerry. Thank you, Tony.
You are welcome.
On to the next one, PGO 24-09, Comstock Foundation for History and Culture. An exhibit by documentary artist Valerie Lyman, who will present photographs of American industrial history in multiple points of projection directly onto the raw industrial surfaces and machinery throughout Donovan Mill in Silver City, Nevada. Let's begin with Suzanne. Could we get your score and comments on this applicant, please?
Yes, absolutely. My initial score was 88. I found the budget kind of confusing, but I am applauding the project's aim. The work samples were very good, but what I would have liked to have known is more about the history of how this artist came to work at the site in 2017, and more documentation that the public is demanding for her return. I mean, I can see why, but you can't just say, you have to show, you have to tell us. I thought it was a pretty cool project.
This is Jerry. Thank you very much. Rachel, could we get your score and comments, please?
Sure. This is Rachel Morgan. My preliminary score was 75. This is an expansion of a previous presentation. As Suzanne said, it's great to see that there's a demand for the expansion of the project, but we didn't really actually get to see that demand. So it would have been helpful how that was captured and could have shown us that. The evaluations don't seem to align directly to the goals. For example, they're tracking the turnout number, but there's not a goal for the turnout number. So it would have been nice to see those go together. And I was also confused by the budget. The volunteer hours were listed twice, both in the expenses and in the in-kind. And I didn't understand why that was in two places. There really wasn't, for me, there really wasn't demographic information. The application talks about who it wants to reach, but that isn't exactly what we're asking for. We want to know more about the community that the project is happening in. I would like to know a little bit more how they're going to address DEI and accessibility more proactively. Are there things being offered in multiple languages? Is there a need or a possibility of an ASL interpreter at various events or times? And I was kind of expecting more developed work samples, since this is an expansion of something that had already happened. I felt like what we were given, I just expected more. And so I would highly encourage the applicant to maybe do some video. That would have been nice to see people interacting with the project. And being able to see their reactions. That would have been really helpful to include in this project grant. So I would highly encourage them to capture some of that because I had a hard time with the work samples myself.
This is Jerry. Thank you. Eric, could we get your score and comments, please?
Certainly, this is Eric Giles. I have to say, sometimes it's nice to go after Rachel because I don't have much to add to what she said. I'll just say that I think that they're, I think they can do more with their evaluation process. Like, I don't know that they're actually getting data related to the actual experience of visitors or demographics at all to people there. I think it helped them target the people that they want to come into this. I didn't see a goal again of how many attendees they're hoping to attract or what communities they may be targeting to get more people out. The budget was confusing, and I was kind of like, well, if you want this to be attended that much, is this enough for marketing? I don't understand this with the volunteer hours, so some cleanup there. My preliminary score was 90 on this, though, because I thought it was an interesting project. And very much centered on community building, particularly in establishing the history of the place and getting people to have pride in their community and location.
This is Jerry. Great. Thank you very much. Kat, could we get your score and comments, please?
Yes, Kat Galley, my preliminary score was 75. In addition to what's already been said by everyone, I did not like that the contracted artist is in charge of the project. One of our questions to evaluate is, do they have qualified personnel to plan and manage the project? And I'm sure the artist is, but I, as an organization, would like to have a hand in organizing something like that and be more involved in the process and making sure that the artist is meeting all the criteria so that your organization at the end is not, letting something fall through the cracks and now it's making you look bad, but it was a contracted position, but it's under your name and everything. So that was something that I, in addition to everything else that was said, really
Oh, hello. And I completely agree on the work samples. That was there was not more there. And then finally, they had talked about the diverse voices being represented in the project in a really vague way. There was maybe one sentence about it. And I would have really loved some specific examples of who those individuals were, what their backgrounds were, and how that tied into the area. Oh, and my preliminary score is 72.
This is Jerry. Thank you, each of you. Are there any further discussion on this applicant?
You need my final score? 88.
Okay, let's move on. Tony, could we have you collect the final scores?
This is Tony. I will go ahead and run through final scores for PGO 24-09, Comstock Foundation for History and Culture. We'll begin scoring with Rachel. Your scores, please.
This is Rachel. My preliminary score was 75, and it will stay that way.
Thank you, Rachel. Sierra, your score, please.
This is Sierra. My preliminary score was 72, and I will keep it at 72.
Thank you. Eric, your score, please.
My preliminary score was 90, but I'm going to bring that down to 85, mostly because of the confusion of the budget that others were experiencing, as well as some of the gaps in the information provided that were mentioned.
Thank you, Eric. Suzanne, your score, please.
88.
Thank you. And Kat, your score.
75.
75. Okay. Okay, final scores for PGO 24-09, Comstock Foundation for History and Culture. Suzanne, 88, Kat, 75, Rachel, 75, Sierra, 72, Eric, 85, for a final average score of 79 even.
Hey, this is Jerry again. Thank you. Moving on to the next application, PGO 24-10, Truckee Meadows Parks Foundation, a public installation consisting of a mile of texts along sidewalks and pathways reflecting on stream ecology, land formation, and how stories shape our experience of place. Okay, let's start with Kat. Could you offer your comments and your score, please?
Yes, this is Kat Galley for the record. I gave this applicant a preliminary score of 100. I felt there was a lot of details and explanations in the application. They've already got a lot of partners committed to helping advertise and work on the project, and committed funds. And a lot of ways to gather data and feedback. So I thought this was a great project and a great application.
This is Jerry. Thank you. Sierra, could we get your
This is Sierra. My preliminary score was also 100. I thought it was very well researched, with years of background study included. It was very impressive. Really compelling impact using art to understand nature and the stewardship within the watershed. Just a really well-planned project. Considerable public and private support, really impressive fundraising and outreach, thorough plan for marketing. I was really impressed by this application.
This is Jerry. Thank you very much. Suzanne, could we get your score and comments, please?
My initial score was 92. I thought this was public art of the very best kind, and that it's going to grab and hold people's attention. They have a great project team, and I would like to adjust my score.
Oh, this is Jerry. When we get to that point, we'll
okay. Okay.
Thank you. Rachel, could we get your score and comments?
Yeah, so this is Rachel. I I will admit, so my preliminary score is 77, and I am not sure why, because now rereading my comments, I'm not sure why I scored them so low. But yeah, I'll adjust mine at the end too. But I did have a few comments. They're using Placer AI data, which is incredibly thorough. So I would just encourage them to think about what it is that they want to get out of that data, because it can give you a lot. So just make sure you know what it is you're looking for when you start to dig into that. And then I thought the partners seemed very involved, not only fiscally, but in other ways as well. I did want to say why the artist was chosen. It seemed a little bit like a closed process. If the artist was chosen for a specific reason, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more about that. I wasn't sure if the artist came to the foundation with the idea, or the foundation had the idea and sought out the artist. I wasn't exactly sure. So a little bit more clarification there would have helped. And then I think it would have been interesting. They talked about how they tested the materials over some time. So being able to see that in a work sample, I think would have been really interesting. I would have really appreciated that. And those are my comments.
This is Jerry. Thank you. And Eric, I think your scoring comments, please.
Like, this is Eric Giles. I gave this a 96 as my preliminary score for many of the same reasons everyone has mentioned. My only comment to add is I think it would be interesting. I did not see this in the application, how they collect the experience of people who go through this public art at the time. So consider putting up like a simple sign with a QR code linked to an online form or something like that, because I think people are going to have strong reactions to this. They're going to enjoy it, and that is data you definitely want to collect moving forward.
This is Jerry. Thank you. I believe that's everyone. Tony, could we move to you and final scoring?
Thanks, Jerry. This is Tony, just ensuring that all the panelists, any further discussion that any of you would like to have before we go to final scores?
Yes.
Great. Okay, seeing none. So we'll begin with Sierra, your preliminary and final score for PGO 24-10 Truckee Meadows Park Foundation.
This is Sierra. My preliminary score was 100. I'm going to stay at 100.
Thank you. Eric.
This is Eric. My preliminary score was 96, and I'll be staying at 96.
Thank you, Eric. Suzanne.
My preliminary score was, I don't know, but I'm gonna up it to 96.
This is Tony. Suzanne, just confirming, I want to double check your preliminary score I have is a 92.
Yes.
And you want to move it up to a 96.
Correct.
And can you just give some qualifying reasons as to why you want to raise your score, please?
Because the project is the bomb.
Thank you. Kat.
My preliminary score was 100 and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you, Kat and Rachel.
So my preliminary was 77, but I'd like to raise that to a 90 based on the extensive planning that has been done for this project.
Thank you. Okay. Final scores for PGO 24-10 Truckee Meadows Park Foundation. Suzanne 96, Kat 100, Rachel 90, Sierra 100, and Eric 96 for a final average score of 96.4.
Ooh.
Okay. Thank you, Tony. Moving on now to applicant PGO 24-12, Japanese Festival Association of Nevada. Aki Matsuri Japanese Festival 2023. Outdoor public festival featuring Japanese arts, culture, performances, outreach activity booths, Japanese, Asian food, and retail sales vendor booths. Eric, let's start with you, please.
Eric, this is Eric Giles. My preliminary score for this was also 96. This is a third annual, 14th annual festival of this, and it looks like they have a partnership with the city of Henderson, and they seem to know what they're doing. They have all the personnel listed. Everything seems to line up really well. It sounds like an interesting festival that they have a lot of experience running. My only comments is also, I'm just not sure within their surveys how they're tracking the demographics of the people that come in there. I mean, it looks like they're targeting numbers, but no demographics. I'm just curious how they do that. It'd be good to see that. I'm also a little bit, want to know a little bit more information about how they're encouraging a diverse audience. Where do they have the demographic data? You know, if so, how are they targeting promotion to make sure they're bringing in a diverse audience? Now, is there a preset audience within the city of Henderson and surrounding areas? If so, how are they reaching out to them? Just a little more information on that.
All right, this is Jerry. Thank you, Eric. Kat, could we get your score and comments, please?
My preliminary score was 97. Very much what Eric said. And in addition to that, I felt like the event preparation was kind of missing in the timeline to see. And I'm sure, like Eric said, 14th year, to them, they have all the things in their head, but there's a lot of pieces going into a large festival like that. And you know, if you're forgetting to write it down for a grant application, maybe you're forgetting something for your event preparation also. So just a good reminder to have all those details written down.
Okay, this is Jerry. Thank you, Kat. Sierra, can we get your score and comments?
This is Sierra. My preliminary score was 82, and that is not because I think it is not a project worth funding, but again, I'll echo what Kat said, is that there was just a lot missing from the planning and the evaluation before and after the festival. It also has a clear impact for the defined community, I would assume, but I didn't see any specific data about especially the AAPI community in the Las Vegas Valley. It kind of had a general statement that it is Las Vegas Valley is the most diverse population in Nevada, and it's home to a growing AAPI community. And that's a really specific demographic that I would love them to have given us more information on, especially for a festival that's this culturally important. I thought the work samples were strong and showed an excellent commitment to inclusion, specifically in the TICA work samples. There were all ages and abilities involved.
This is Jerry. Thank you, Sierra. Suzanne, can we get your score and comments?
Yeah. I originally gave this an 83. I feel like it was, you know, the same thing. It's like when you get these long-standing festivals and organizations, you know, they kind of got it down and they get a little stale sometimes. My question was, this is a festival that's focused on Henderson. So how is that different than the Japanese festival going on in Las Vegas, Center Las Vegas? I mean, I just was kind of like, you know, it was just kind of lost in the mist of these kinds of things, you know. If they had told me something more about their community in Henderson that they were reaching out to, that might have meant more to me. I mean, maybe that's just because I'm an old grant reviewer, and it's like, okay, here's another one. Okay, you know, I mean, that's it did not impress me that they knew anything specific to their community. It just was sort of blanket.
Okay, this is Jerry. Thank you. And Rachel, I think we need your comment and scores.
Sounds good. This is Rachel Morgan. My preliminary score was 81. I had a lot of the same comments everyone else did, so I'm not going to repeat those. The one thing I did find interesting was that they talk about the anticipated impact on the economy, but it would be nice to see that wrapped into either a survey or an evaluation, or tie it to goals somehow. It was kind of just hanging out there on its own. And I think it's important, and it definitely helps tell the story, but tie that into something. And I would have liked to have seen too how the artists are chosen. But once again, I think because this has been going on for so long, they probably go back to the artists that either, have a good audience reaction, or they know them. But I would really like to see some sort of criteria about how they're choosing who is involved in the festival. I think that would really help tell the artistic quality story.
This is Jerry. I think that's everyone. Is there any further comments on this one? Okay, hearing none. Tony, could you move on to the final scoring?
Yes, this is Tony. Thank you, Jerry. We are looking at PGO 24-12 Japanese Festival Association of Nevada. And Eric, we will begin with your scores, please.
My preliminary score is a 96. I think I'm going to adjust that down though to 92. I do feel like they were vague. And I've read a lot of grants as well. I was like, oh, these people know what they're doing. So I kind of let them get away with a bunch as I was reading through there that didn't necessarily need to get away with.
Thank you, Eric. Suzanne.
83.
Great. Thank you. And Kat.
My preliminary score was 97, and I'm going to adjust it to 92 for the same.
And just clarifying, Kat, your audio got a little light there. You're changing that score for. Oh no, that froze. Did we freeze? Hi all, can you hear me okay? Sorry about that. So I'm going to go back to the score sheet. One moment. All right, this is Tony and Kat. I think my computer cut out here. So looking at your score, you adjusted it to a 92. And could you just provide your reasoning, please?
Yes, I adjusted mine down from a 97 to a 92, and I said that I echo a lot what Eric said, that sometimes as you're reading these descriptions of events that are going on for as long as they have, you're filling in the blanks, but hearing everybody else's criticism, I think my mind was filling in information that actually wasn't specifically defined in the application.
Excellent, thank you. Rachel, your scores, please.
My preliminary score was 81, and it will stay that way.
Thank you, Rachel. And Sierra.
This is Sierra. My preliminary score was 82, and I will keep it at 82.
Great. Thank you, Sierra. Final scores for PGO 24-12 Japanese Festival Association of Nevada. Suzanne, 83. Kat, 92. Rachel, 81. Sierra, 82. Eric, 92. For a final average score of 86 even.
Okay, this is Jerry. Moving on to PGO 24-13 Double Scoop. This project consists of 30 timely, relevant articles on Nevada art, including exhibition reviews, artist profiles, Q&As, and art news features to be published on Double Scoop. Sierra, let's start with you. could you offer your score and comments?
This is Sierra. Bear with me. I'm just pulling everything up. Okay. Sierra, my initial score was a 95. I thought it was very clear goals, objectives, and outcomes with specific metrics, which I always love. Something strange. One of the bios looked like a screenshot and it was cut off. So I think that was just probably an incorrect upload. I thought the earned income was strong from the membership revenue. There was excellent demographic info on the specific community that Double Scoop serves. That was actually the best I had seen at this point in my review. Really thorough and specific demographic data. I thought in number 18, it was a really thoughtful and transparent answer about implicit bias. And I thought that was a really great that she brought that up. And then I thought the work samples were very strong, showcased many writers with different voices and really supported the narrative.
This is Jerry. Thank you. Suzanne, could we get your score and comments, please?
Sure. I initially scored a 94. I said that this organization fills a real need in the state for independent arts journalism. There's no other outlet. They also have a real good grasp on where and how they should move forward. So, I mean, in my mind, they can do no wrong. They did great.
This is Jerry. Thank you. Rachel, could we get your score and comments?
Yeah, so this is Rachel. I might have read this differently. So I'm really glad we have this panel. I'm so glad we had this discussion. My preliminary score was 78 because I left with a lot of questions. I did like that the articles will cover all regions of the state. It's not really spelled out to me if they're covering a range of artistic genres. Are they going to do music, visual art, theater? I wasn't exactly sure. That wasn't spelled out. I was also curious about the volunteer hours. Are those people that are different than the two managers, or is that some of the managers' time? And then I was surprised there really wasn't a lot of information about who will be writing the pieces. I was surprised also by using a podcast as a way of marketing. And I really wanted to know more about that, how many people are driven to the website because of a podcast. I am just not that person. And so I would love to see how that translates into marketing and driving people to your website. I think it would be nice to see them do some sort of reporting or evaluation so that they can talk about DEI in terms of numbers. For instance, are there a certain number of articles talking about different cultures or the contributors themselves who are writing the articles? Do they provide articles in other languages? Is that something that they do or is a possibility? And the bios were incredibly short to me and just didn't give me a lot of information. I really wanted to know a lot more about who the writers were that are involved in the project. And those are my comments.
This is Jerry. Thank you. Eric, could we get your score and comments, please?
Certainly, this is Eric, and I definitely read this differently than everyone else. I gave this a 65 as my preliminary score. And the main reason I did that is it was reading to me as if this is money to support the hiring of new staff members for Double Scoop. So these journalists are being hired, it sounded like directly by Chris Wagner, their editor and executive director. to write these articles as freelance, writers. And so I was reading this as, oh, she's using the grant to hire, staff to help her staff this magazine, which, to me kind of went over that line towards general operating support from Project Grant. I also found the bios kind of very shallow. I didn't get a lot of information out of those. It seemed like their stated goal was to fill the void in arts reporting in the area was a good goal, but it felt more like their actual goal was to increase their readership and membership size through that. So I definitely came away from this application with a bad taste in my mouth regarding it because of the way I was reading that, for sure.
Okay, this is Jerry. Thank you. And Kat, could we get your?
This is an interesting one to follow. I gave this a preliminary score of 100. I really like the proposal. I like the uniqueness of what it was doing right when it comes to the art reporting. It's the digital form that, it used to be 20 years ago, 40 years ago, people read the newspaper and they read the review for the theater performance, and it kind of determined the success of the piece, yes or no. And nowadays that's kind of gone away more and more. So having that specific to Nevada reporting on what's going on in the arts world, I thought was amazing. And the use of data, the in-kind, the accessible website, the fact that they go to festivals and speak in classrooms to have more of an outreach. I read it very differently. So this is so interesting. I love all this process and learning from everybody. It's just, I'm fascinated and I love what we're doing.
This is Jerry. Thank you, really. I think that's everyone. Is there any additional thoughts or comments on this applicant?
This is Eric. I'd just like to say that, I think what I saw at Double Scoop and what they're doing is great. I think to clarify, I felt like this application wasn't appropriate for this category is kind of where I was coming from with that.
And this is Sierra, and I'm just because I'm very familiar with Nevada Arts Council grant policy from my previous employment. I pulled up the grant policies, and I know that staff reviews all of these for eligibility before they get to us. So something like that, maybe shouldn't be included in the actual score. And I do want to point out this one general funding restrictions that staff uses. So what is not eligible is journalism, historical or academic documentary film, and electronic media arts that do not demonstrate significant artistic emphasis, consideration, and distinction. So I'm assuming that staff reviewed this and determined that this does demonstrate significant artistic emphasis, consideration, and distinction, and therefore qualifies as an arts project. And Nevada Arts Council staff, please correct me if I'm wrong.
Review and confirm that this project was eligible as submitted.
This is Jerry. Thank you very much. Okay, I guess moving on now to the final scoring. Tony?
We are looking at final scores for PGO 24-13 Double Scoop. Suzanne, I will begin with you.
94.
Thank you. Kat.
This is Kat. My preliminary score was 100, and based on some of the points that were made earlier by the other panelists, where I think I was doing the same thing as I was doing with the Japanese festival, where my mind was filling in the information that wasn't exactly spelled out. I'm going to adjust it to 95.
Thank you, Kat. Rachel.
This is Rachel. My preliminary score was 78, but I'd like to change that to 85 based on the discussion and the work that this organization does and this project does statewide.
Thank you, Rachel. And Sierra.
This is Sierra. My preliminary score was 95, and I'm going to bring that down to 93, specifically because of the bios. I didn't realize those were quite so lacking, and when I revisited them, I saw that.
Thank you, Sierra and Eric.
My preliminary score was 65. I am going to raise that up to 85, hearing a little bit more from Sierra and hearing what everyone else is saying about the importance of this. It's pretty obvious that I read this a completely different way than everyone else.
Thank you, Eric. Final scores for PGO 24-13 double scoop. Suzanne 94, Kat 95, Rachel 85, Sierra 93, Eric 85 for a final average score of 90.4.
Okay, this is Jerry. What say we take a break for lunch? This is Jerry Shefsick for the record, and we'll resume our review beginning with PGA. Is that correct? 2417.
This is Tony, it would be PGO.
Okay, PGO 2417, the Goldwell Open Air Museum. The Bullfrog Biennial 2023. The third edition of Goldwell's Arts Festival in Rhyolite, Nevada, and the first to directly partner with some of UNLV's MFA students. So for begin the reviews, we start with Sierra. Could we have your score and your comments, please?
This is Sierra. Give me just one moment. I'm jumping to the correct application. Okay. My initial score, 17, yes. My initial score is 88. I appreciated the updates to the festival. I know this is a long-standing festival from the application, and they're making some newer updates this year, including UNLV students and targeting more inclusion of the BIPOC community. I thought there was a strong evaluation plan. There was just an issue on one of the resumes that was cut off on the side. Again, some formatting stuff that made me not able to read one of the resumes. I thought the budget narrative was really helpful. I always really appreciate, honestly, when applicants use that field. I think that there's rarely a reason that that's going to hurt your application, so I strongly encourage that. Let's see, I would like to have seen a bit more specificity and detailed plans in the DEI description. They said that it will not be an afterthought, but then it kind of seemed like an afterthought because we did not have detailed information, especially with that new focus on the BIPOC community. I did like that they had a pretty detailed and thorough accessibility plan, including sensory friendly areas, which I don't see often. And I think that that's a really great thing to include. They did include the specific criteria to select artists. I always like to see that. And I thought the artistic samples were really strong, especially the billboard mural I thought was really compelling.
This is Jerry. Thank you, Sierra. Kat, could we hear your score and your comments on this, please?
My score for this application is 87. I thought the timeline needed a little bit more detail. They were saying how they're going to start using Instagram Reels, but I wasn't sure why, just because that's the new thing. That might not be what's for your audience and who you are trying to reach. I also thought the audience in general was very broadly defined. It's like all of Clark County, all of Nye County. Well, that's huge. And you know, being Bailey, being the closest community, and I felt like there was a little bit of information lacking. It was like for everyone. Well, okay, how do you target those everyone's? other than those Instagram reels that I thought were very specific to a very, very specific audience that they didn't define.
Okay, this is Jerry. Thank you. Eric, could we have your comment and score, please?
Certainly, this is Eric Giles. My preliminary score is a 94 on this. Just about everything I had written down has already been said by Sierra and Kat. I'd like to just put in that it'd be great to see more examples or a plan as to how they were going to make DEI a goal throughout the planning. I know Sierra mentioned that it wasn't going to be an afterthought, but then it really was an afterthought, as she said, because I didn't see any steps they were taking to do that.
This is Jerry. Thank you, Eric. And Rachel, could we have your thoughts and your score, please?
Yeah, this is Rachel Morgan. My preliminary score was 81. A lot of what my comments have already been talked about. I do have a couple things. Because I'm not familiar with the community, it would have been nice to have a couple of lines in the project description just to kind of give a frame of reference to know a little bit more about the community. I had the same problem with the bios, so maybe just a second read through before hitting that submit button, making sure that we can see everything. I did in the budget, I did have a question. It looks like there's 2 lines of in kind. There was one in the cash and one in the in kind. So maybe just kind of double checking that as well. But I did appreciate that the additional detail that was provided. That is really helpful. I worried a little bit that there may not be a lot of enthusiasm for the event. And this is why. There's a line in section B that says simply keeping our tradition of the Bullfrog Biennial going. And so I was a little worried that maybe there wasn't a lot of enthusiasm behind that, because just keeping it going kind of seemed, I don't know, seemed a little lackluster. So I just want to make sure this is something that the community really does support and really does want to see continuing. And same comments about the diversity. I was also curious if that is part of the criteria when they're considering artists, maybe talking about that in section C, when you talk about the artists who are involved, if that is part of the criteria and something that you're really wanting to make important, it would be great to talk about that in that section. But I do have the artists that are creating this art. This project will start conversations, which I thought was incredibly important. I thought the project is an important one.
Okay, this is Jerry. Thank you. Any other thoughts or comments on this applicant? Okay, Tony, could we move on to the scoring?
This is Tony. Yes, so we'll share my screen now. Okay. For PGO 24-17 Goldwell Open Air Museum, I'm actually going to begin with Eric. Your scores, please.
Certainly, this is Eric, and my preliminary score was 94, and I'm going to leave it there.
Thank you, Eric. Kat.
This is Kat. My preliminary score was 87, and I'm going to leave it also.
Thank you, Kat. And Rachel.
Sorry, that mute button got away from me. My preliminary score is 81, and it will stay that way.
Thank you, Rachel. And Sierra.
This is Sierra. My preliminary score was 88, and I will keep it at 88.
Great. Thank you. Final scores for PGO 24-17 Goldwell Open Air Museum. Kat with a score of 87, Rachel with a score of 81, Sierra with a score of 88, Eric with a score of 94. And just as a reminder, Suzanne is not scoring this due to conflict of interest. So that leaves a final average score of 87.5. And again, this is Tony. I'm just going to go ahead and bring Suzanne back in. So bear with me here. Yay. Hi, Suzanne. Okay, great. Jerry, back to you.
Okay, this is Jerry again. Thank you. Okay, back to looking at PGO 24-14, Love Outreach Incorporated. The world premiere of Faces in the Dark, an original musical drama performed at LVCCLD, which is the Las Vegas Clark County Library District, Performing Arts Center on February 16th and 17th, 2024, with script and songs written by Dr. Kathleen Christie Brooks, former member of the Platters. Kat, let's start with you. Could you give us your score and your comments on this, please?
This is Kat. I gave this applicant a score of 100. I thought it was a great project. Very well written, detailed answers. They seem to be very organized. I like that they're recording the performance so that they get a greater reach even beyond the performance dates, and that they already have collaborations for advertising, all those things.
This is Jerry. Thank you. Eric, could we get your score and your comments on that?
Certainly, this is Eric. I think that I gave this a preliminary score of 83. I just didn't feel like there's a lot of information about the audience survey. Like, what are they collecting? You know, are they looking at demographics? Are they looking at suggestions, experience metrics? So it would have been a good idea to include an example of those questions, and information is going to be collected. Another thing, I wasn't sure who the audience and community they were targeting. So demographics of the community they are serving, who they're hoping to bring in. I needed a little bit more with those. The people that are actually involved in this are very high quality people. I was, pleased to see the folks that were in this, and it sounds like it's going to be a great show. So I think it's just a little bit more about, what are your demographics, who are you targeting, and who are you trying to get there, and then how do you go through evaluating the audience at the end for future productions.
This is Jerry. Thank you. Rachel, could we get your score and comments, please?
Yeah, so this is Rachel Morgan. I give it a preliminary score of 73. I had a lot of questions in this application. The timeline was a little bit hard to follow because it didn't flow in chronological order. I did appreciate seeing assessment in the timeline, however, shows that they put a lot of importance on that, and that it's, thought out ahead of time, which I really appreciate. I would caution on some of the wording that was used. They use a phrase, culturally starved communities, and I'm not sure what that means exactly. And also the community may not see themselves that way. So I would highly suggest using the term underserved, which the NEA has a definition of, which those whose opportunities to experience the arts are limited relative to geography, ethnicity, economics, or disability. And that might be a little bit better phrase to use. I had the same questions about the evaluations and the assessments. And because there's no demographic information, I worried that the project was trying to be something for everyone. So it's really hard to tell if the marketing is relevant to the community or not, because I didn't know the community very well. I didn't see that information. They talk about an educational component briefly, but then it doesn't show up anywhere else. And so I was really curious how that fit into the project overall and what that meant to the project. And then it doesn't seem, and if I misread this, please somebody let me know, but I didn't see an open audition process. So the artists seem to be chosen as part of a closed group. So that concerned me a little bit. So I would just, have the applicant think about how can you create a more open process that the community can be involved in, and you're looking at quality and you have a criteria that you're choosing artists to be a part of this project. And those are my comments.
This is Jerry. Thank you. Suzanne, could we get your score and comments?
All right, hello. My initial score was 81, and I felt this was a very curious application, reflecting a Southern Nevada heritage not often brought up. I liked the Mount Charleston tie-in to the story. I guess my feeling was, hello, folks, you live here long enough, and every one of these past entertainers has a story they want to do. I'm not sure that's what the Arts Council's here for. And that's kind of what this felt like to me. It was like, what is this, No, maybe that's me bringing too much of my own stuff into it. I'm sure it'll be an enjoyable production, but it just, to me, it just didn't hit the mark of what we're looking for with stuff that needs state support. Sorry.
This is Tony. Just a reminder, and Suzanne, you referenced this, but just for clarity, is please make sure that we're assessing these scores based on what's on the application.
I am basing it on what I saw in the application.
Perfect. Thank you.
Never heard of this group before.
Thank you very much.
This is Jerry. Thank you. And Sierra, could we get your score and comments, please?
This is Sierra. I echo a lot of my preliminary score was 71, and I echo a lot of what the other panelists had said. Just lacking some specificity. I had the word vague a lot throughout a lot of these. Would have liked to have seen a more thoughtful description of the impact on the defined community, and more demographic information. Again, the whole Las Vegas, all of Las Vegas is a little bit too broad for that question for me across the board, and I didn't quite see the significant impact as described in question number 15. A lot of these answers described the plot of the show, and the plot was, kept coming back to as the reason that this had an impact. And I would have loved to see at least more of a defined answer about the impact maybe on the artists, or, more of a 360 view of that besides just the plot of the musical. I think it was said that it's just about we should work together and help each other in this world. And again, that's just a little bit too vague for me. And the selection process was problematic for me. It seemed to be precast from the playwright's previous connections and with no other selection metrics. And there may have been selection metrics, it's just they weren't spelled out in this application. I thought the backup documentation was really good. It supported project planning. It did seem like a well thought out plan and management of the project itself.
This is Jerry. Thank you. Are there any other, any further comments or thoughts that you want to share? Okay, Tony, could we move to the final scoring, please?
Yes, thank you, Jerry. This is Tony. We are reviewing final scoring for PGO 24-14 Love Outreach, Inc. And Kat, I will go ahead and begin with you. Preliminary and final score, please. Oh. Did we lose Kat? Oh, there she is. You're muted, Kat, maybe your audio's weird again. Still not able to hear you. No. I've noticed maybe if you scoot up a little bit closer, it seemed like that helped your audio at times. Oh, there you are. You're
Okay.
back.
I might, okay, I don't know what it is. I think it might be a cable not being plugged in. So after this, I'm just gonna get up and finagle with the laptop behind my
Okay.
screens. I'm sorry about that. It's always, you never have issues until you need your equipment.
Right.
So my preliminary score was 100, and I agree with what some of the other panelists said when it came to the evaluation process and defining the audience. So I would like to score it at a 94.
Thank you, Kat. Rachel.
This is Rachel. My preliminary was 73 and it will stay that way.
Thank you, Rachel. Sierra.
This is Sierra. My preliminary was 71, and I'm actually going to bring that up to 73. There's something that Eric had mentioned about the qualifications of the folks involved in the project for artistic excellence, and so that I wanted to bump my score up for 2 points.
Thank you, Sierra. Eric.
My preliminary, this is Eric. My preliminary was 83, and it's going to say 83.
Thank you, Eric. And Suzanne.
My preliminary was 81. It's going to stay there.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Final scores for PGO 24-14 Love Outreach, Inc. Suzanne, 81, Kat, 94, Rachel, 73, Sierra, 73, Eric, 83, for an average score of 80.8.
Great. This is Jerry again. Moving on to applicant PGO 2415, Carson Valley Pops Orchestra. Pops Players Pipers, a one-time orchestral performance at the Pipers Opera House in Virginia City, Nevada in the spring of 2024. Rachel, could we start with you and get your comments and score, please?
Yeah, this is Rachel Morgan. So my preliminary score was 64. I really struggled with this application. I felt like they could have used some more definitive wording. For example, they used, we felt the concerts were really well received. Is there a way to track that to be able to tell us that they were well received? I would have liked to have known more about the community. It's kind of assumed in the application that the panelists know the community, and I did not. I did a quick Google search because I was really curious. And so seeing that was a smaller community, this is such a great opportunity. And so I really would have liked to have seen that talked about in the application. It's big impact. I would also highly encourage the applicant to think of some ways to track information. How can they track audience appreciation, surveys, comment boards, even conversations in the lobby after the event happens with board members are all great ways to gather information. There's really no demographic information. So it, once again, they talk about traveling to another community, but I didn't understand why they were going to this other community, or what makes it different that the one that they're located in. I thought the idea of these television interviews is an intriguing one, but it sounded like it kind of fell by the wayside. Nobody really wanted to do it in the group. But I feel like if you push that and had some, one-on-one conversations with the orchestra members saying, hey, to be a great thing and get their buy-in, I really do think it's possible. Sometimes when you open things up to a group, we've all been there. When you open them up to a group, no one's going to volunteer, right? So I think it is still a great idea, and maybe providing some coaching, some run through, that it could still work. I think too, they could think of some ways to advance DEI and accessibility issues. Could they present works by diverse composers or other cultures? Are there even large print programs available? Those are all things that we're kind of missing from the application. They do say that a bus from an assisted living community attended, which is great to see. I'd be really curious why. Was there some outreach that was done ahead of time? Is there some sort of connection between the orchestra and this facility? All those things were kind of missing. And if that was a success, are there other assisted facilities that you could reach out to? I do think the orchestra serves a valuable purpose in the community. It's a great chance for community members to come together and to gather as artists and to perform together. But there was just a lot of information missing from the application for me. And those are my comments.
Hey, this is Jerry. Thank you. Suzanne, could we get your score and comments, please?
Sure, my initial score is 77. And, you know, I love community orchestra as much as anyone, but this project had some real flaws. I felt like the artistic samples they provided were not as strong as I would have hoped musically. I mean, they didn't sound good to me. And, you know, if the point of the project is to encourage younger people to pick up an instrument, it's going to take more than just an out-of-town concert to do it. I mean, I know how small Eureka is. But, you know, I would have liked to seen a more calculated approach to the outreach that they wanted to do. It seemed pretty haphazard to me. And I felt bad about that because, you know, hey, being a Nevada person, you want to love on these little town groups, but when they don't cut it, they don't cut it. I guess that was kind of harsh.
Unmuted now. This is Jerry. Thank you. Sierra, could we ask for your score and comments?
This is Sierra. My preliminary score was 70. I just thought overall it felt the application felt hastily written and could have used more detailed and thoughtful responses throughout, particularly in the planning and management section. The timeline, the goals and objectives, the evaluation method. I did think the budget narrative was helpful. And again, echoing more information about the community they serve and demographics. I did, I had a bit of an issue with the DEI question. Sorry, I'm trying to pull it up specifically here. An orchestra by its very nature is generally made up of a diverse group of musicians. Trumpet players are not violin players. And this question, I think, requires a little bit less levity in it. And I appreciate they did have a voice throughout the application, but in a question like this, I would have liked something a little bit more thoughtful. And I do like the open to all ethos and the collaboration to choose the pieces with the members of the orchestra to have buy-in. I thought that was a really great process. And I did think their work samples were solid.
This is Jerry. Thank you. Kat, could we get your comments and score, please?
Tell me how my mic's working. Is it okay? Okay. I unplugged and plugged, and I don't know. I think I need better speakers. This is Kat. I gave this applicant a preliminary score of 90, which I find funny because I had the same criticism that's been mentioned before. So despite me having the same issues, I still gave them a lot more points. So that was interesting for me. In adding to what Sierra said, it was actually said that there was something for everyone in their selection, and I agree with that. That's not addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion when you're saying it's something for everyone. Okay, well, what is that what you're doing? And the data gathering, feedback is fine, but that's hearsay. Can you narrow it down a little bit more? So interesting that I had the same thoughts in my notes and still came to a 90.
Thank you. This is Jerry. I think Eric, we get your thoughts and your score.
Yes, this is Eric Giles. My preliminary score was an 85, and looking at my notes, it aligned with everyone else's, so I think it caught me on a generous day. I will say, in addition, to kind of add on a bit, I think this feels like one of those small groups that sees evaluation as a hurdle to getting a grant rather than something that could be beneficial to them and helping them better target their audiences, better target their music selections for the audiences they're presenting at. So I think I would encourage them to really look at evaluation and really approach it as a means towards improving their repertoire, improving their promotions, and not just as something they have to do in order to get a grant.
This is Jerry. Thank you. I believe that's everyone. Are there any final questions or comments or discussion on this applicant? Okay, Tony, could we turn it to you for your scoring?
Thank you, Jerry. This is Tony. We will be working on final scores for PGO 24-15 Carson Valley Pops Orchestra. Rachel, I will begin with you. Your preliminary and final scores, please.
This is Rachel. My preliminary score was 64, and it will stay there.
Thank you, Rachel. Sierra.
This is Sierra. My preliminary score was 70, and I will keep it at 70.
Thank you, Sierra. Eric.
This is Eric. My preliminary score is 85, and I'm going to adjust that down to 78. Just hearing all the other panelists basically echoing my notes, I feel like I scored this a bit too high on the day of.
Thank you, Eric. Suzanne.
I can't remember. Well, oh, I got to go back to my thing. I think it was 77, but I'm not possible. Maybe that's right.
That's correct. That's
Yay.
correct. And that's this is Tony. Suzanne, that will be your final score as well?
Yes.
Thank you. And Kat.
My preliminary score was 90, and I am going to adjust that down to 85 based on the discussions that we had and the criticism that I noted, but clearly didn't actually deduct points enough for.
Thank you, Kat. Final scores for PGO 24-15 Carson Valley Pops Orchestra. Suzanne 77, Kat 85, Rachel 64, Sierra 70, Eric 78, for a final average score of 74.8.
Okay, thank you. This is Jerry again. Thank you, Tony. On to the next one, PGO 24-16, B, the Change Project. Wedekind Road Art Project, or RAP, is a community-based public art project that engages residents in art to capture the area's history and identity in a series of large-scale murals, while also advocating for walkable streets in a racially and generationally diverse area near downtown Reno, Nevada. Suzanne, let's start with you. Could you get your score and your comment, please?
Yes. Let's see. I initially gave this a 95. I I thought it was a solid community-based art project that reaches out to its target audience as well. The selected artists they've shown seem to have sensitivity and talent adequate to the tasks at hand. And it's nice to see work from artists that are new to me. And it looks like the project has excellent community support and buy-in. It's nice to see somebody doing something new.
This is Jerry. Thank you. Eric, could we get your score and your comments, please?
Certainly. This is Eric. I gave this a 100. I thought this was a great application. I thought it was everything that Suzanne said. I thought it, but also just found it was unique. I was particularly struck by their comment under what makes this particularly important, timely, and compelling, and the history of crime and blight, and how it makes neighbors hesitant to engage in community activities there, and how they're really trying to address that by providing some positivity and trying to bring this community together and using these murals and just having all the buy-in and like trying to kind of revive and refurbish and like their neighborhood. It touched a soft spot in me and their narrative, and I think they had a lot of backup, and just love this one.
This is Jerry. Thank you very much. Sierra, could we get your score and comments, please?
This is Sierra. I agree with Eric. I gave this one 100. I thought it was a really exciting project, a really well thought out application. Some things that really resonated for me. Again, like Eric said, the outreach and collaboration with the local community. I really appreciate that they had an accessibility coordinator as one of the key project personnel. I appreciate that they had mural upkeep in the budget. A lot of folks forget about that. The funding sources were diversified. I loved that they broke down the specific area code for the demographics. I thought that was really a great attention to detail there. And the fact that in the community design workshops that they have a specific, they said at least one community design workshop designed to comply with Chapter 7 of the Design for Accessibility Handbook. I love that they're referencing that. It's really thoughtful. And the group of artists was very diverse and seemed really experienced. So it's a home run for me.
This is Jerry. Thank you. Rachel, could we get your score and comments?
So this is Rachel Morgan. My preliminary score is 98. I loved this application. This made me so happy. My only kind of, and I don't even want to say criticism, but comment was that the day I reviewed this, the website wouldn't open because I wanted to share it with my colleagues. And so, but it was up the next day. But I would encourage them to put some more information on their website. There is very little there. I think this is such a good application and such a good project that they could really use this as a model for other projects. If somebody were looking at how to do a successful community mural project. So I would really highly encourage them to really kind of support that website a little bit more. Everything is great. Yeah. The bios of the key personnel, they all had such varied backgrounds. It made me want to meet them and have conversations because they just sounded like the most interesting people. It was great. The accessibility coordinator, fantastic. And I really appreciated the letters of support. Not every application has those. And not that it's required, but it really showed that the partners were clearly on board with the project, supportive of it, and that they work well together. There's a clear line of communication. So I thought that was a very nice addition to the application.
Well, this is Jerry. Thank you. Kat, could we get your score and comments, please?
This is Kat. My preliminary score was 100 and everything's already been said. Just a fabulous project, fabulous application.
Great. Excuse me, this is Jerry again. Any further thoughts or comments on this one? Okay, Tony, could you work the final scoring?
Thank you, Jerry. This is Tony. We will be discussing final scores for PGO 24-16, Be the Change Project. I will begin with Sierra.
This is Sierra. My preliminary score was 100, and I'm going to stay with 100.
Thank you, Sierra. Eric.
This is Eric. My preliminary score is 100 and will also stay 100.
Thank you, Eric. Suzanne.
Hey, man, I can't open up my thing. That'll tell me. I think it was 95.
Correct. 95 was your preliminary score.
I'll keep it there.
Okay, thank you. Kat.
This is Kat. My preliminary score was 100 and I am keeping it.
Thank you, Kat. And Rachel.
This is Rachel. My preliminary was 98, but I'm going to change that to 100 because I really don't have any criticism on this application.
Thank you, Rachel. Final scores for PGO 24-16, Be the Change Project. Suzanne, 95, Kat, 100, Rachel, 100, Sierra, 100, Eric, 100, for a final average score of 99 even.
Okay, this is Jerry. Moving on now to applicant PGO 24-18, Sierra Watercolor Society. Community Perspectives is a watercolor exhibit devoted to community issues, challenges, responses, and resources. The exhibit will be enhanced by the performance of an original piece of music inspired by the artwork. Kat, let's begin with you. If you would share your score and your thoughts on this.
Right, here. This is Pat. I gave this project a preliminary score of 82. The timeline was missing. I felt like for this kind of project, the marketing budget was really low to actually reach people. I wasn't really sure how artists are selected other than they're available on those dates. It said that all members can submit art. I wasn't sure how that's selected and whether everything that is submitted is then displayed. I had a lot of questions, not a little bit. I had a lot of questions left after I read this.
Thank you. This is Jerry. Rachel, could we get your score and thoughts?
Yeah, so this is Rachel Morgan. My preliminary score was 80. There's a lot of pieces to this project. I do appreciate the commission of a new musical piece to accompany the exhibit, which is kind of a fun idea. Same issue that Kat had, the timeline is very sparse and it's left a lot for us to assume. The goals are very qualitative and very hard to measure. How are you going to measure increasing awareness or increasing compassion for people? If you have ways of doing that, fantastic, please show us that. But it was kind of nebulous. There wasn't a lot there, and it wasn't clear to see how they were going to measure that. The bios of the key personnel were very brief. They do seem very genuine, which is nice, but I would have liked to have known more. The applicant does mention hearing impaired, but I'm curious, have they thought about hiring an ASL interpreter or some sort of audio descriptive service that could be provided at, the gallery opening or the performance of the new piece? They could have specific nights that these services are offered, and see what kind of turnout that they get. Or maybe work with an organization that works with hearing impaired and see what kind of services could be offered to make it more accessible. I do appreciate that the signage is going to be in both English and Spanish. That was nice to see. The application mentions that there's a high number of homeless people in the area. And while the exhibit is free and open to the public, it doesn't mean that everyone feels welcome into the exhibit and into the space. And so are there ways to do intentional outreach and to reach out to this population, since it seems to be very important and a large part of your community? I was curious too why they included a work sample from the notables if they weren't chosen to compose a piece. That was a little odd to me. I didn't quite follow that line of thinking. The additional support materials did help me understand the project better, so I did appreciate those. It put this project in much more of a community engagement light, which was kind of a different shift than how I started the application. So maybe some work on that project description to kind of put that frame of reference in would be really helpful from the beginning. And those are my comments.
This is Jerry. Thank you. Sierra, could we get your score and comments, please?
This is Sierra. My initial score was 83, echoing a lot of the issues the other panelists discussed, especially about the notables, since they're not involved in the project. I did think, the idea of the project was innovative, using both visual and musical arts to address community issues, and they seem to have good partnerships with the local musicians. I liked the budget narrative that demonstrated solid project planning. I would have liked, again, same as other folks, to see a bit more planning go into the accessibility piece. And I did like the supporting documentation.
This is Jerry. Thank you. Eric, could we call on you for your score and comments?
Thank you, Jerry. This is Eric. My preliminary score is 88. Basically, I have the same thing to say as everyone else did. I will emphasize that those support materials really changed my perspective on this. I actually went back and raised the score after I looked at those, because it was my first time through. I just kind of went by their narrative, and then second time looked at all the support materials. So finding a way to bring that out in their descriptive paragraph, I think, is incredibly important. I also have a lot of issues with the evaluation. That, qualitative is great. Getting comments from attendees, would be great. Getting more information on the demographics. I just think this is another case where it's seen as something we should do rather than something we really want to do in order to help inform us moving forward. So this shifting that mindset again, I think would help them out a great deal.
This is Jerry. Thank you. Suzanne, yes, could we get yours, please?
Yeah, my initial score was 87. And I had some problems with their artistic documentation. Some of the watercolors were really good and some were really marginal. And at least, and I don't know if I can make that judgment call, but hey, that's why I'm here in the hot seat. They want me to say that. So, I've been around long enough that, sometimes people, these groups, they twist themselves into what they think they're supposed to be doing, whether it's really what their mission is or not. And I felt like this was kind of that kind of thing. I appreciate their intent, but man, it felt like a grant proposal. That's not the best one I've ever read. Ooh, that's cold.
Okay, this is Jerry. Thank you. Any additional thoughts or comments on this applicant? Okay, Tony, could we turn it to you for the final scoring?
Yes, Jerry, thank you. This is Tony. We will begin a final review of PGO 24-18, Sierra Watercolor Society. And Suzanne, I will begin with you, your preliminary and final scores.
My preliminary was 87. I'm going to drop it to an 83. Based on discussion.
Thank you. Kat,
This is Kat. My preliminary score was an 82, and I'm going to keep it that way.
thank you, Kat. Rachel,
This is Rachel. My preliminary was 80 and I'm going to keep it that way.
thank you, Rachel. Sierra,
This is Sierra. My preliminary score was an 83, and I'm going to keep it at an 83.
thank you, Sierra, and Eric.
Hi, this is Eric. My preliminary was 88, but I'm going to drop that to an 85. For similar reasons to Suzanne, hearing a little bit more about the shortcomings than I caught the first time around.
Thank you, Eric. Final scores for PGO 24-18 Sierra Watercolor Society. Suzanne, 83, Kat, 87, Rachel, 80, Sierra, 83, Eric, 85, for a final average score of 82.6.
This is Jerry. Moving on to PGO 24-19, the Kizuna Japanese Society, the 7th Kizuna Japanese Spring Festival, the opportunity to bring the Las Vegas community together by celebrating the springtime in Japanese way. Let's start with Suzanne. Could we get your score and your thoughts on this?
You bet. My score was 93. I thought that the festival was very well-rounded and well-planned. And I was very impressed with the quality of the diverse types of artists participating. Their attendance numbers are off the chart, just great. They have a really good marketing plan and support from the community. The only thing I put in my notes is proofread your application. It was mostly clear, but some parts were hard to follow, but great story, great project.
Thank you. This is Jerry. Eric, could we go to you for your score and thoughts?
Certainly, this is Eric. Much like Suzanne, I thought this was really solid, well planned out. I may have fallen into the same thing I did with the other festivals. Obviously, they've done this before. They know what they're doing. They have great numbers. I guess I had a couple of questions for them. Aside from the proofreading, are they targeting certain populations through promotion to increase their attendance based off what they've gotten in the previous year? Are they trying to grow that? And I didn't see any real demographic information to help me with that. My preliminary score, nonetheless, was a 95, just because this was very diverse, real well planned. They seem to know what they're doing with a complicated festival. They seem on the ball with it.
This is Jerry. Thank you. Rachel, could we get your score and your thoughts, please?
This is Rachel Morgan. I give it a preliminary score of 81. It's a well-planned event. And I really like that they take their evaluations seriously, because they talk about planning right after analyzing the previous year's evaluations, which was nice. What would be nice to see is how they tie evaluations into their goals and objectives. I wasn't quite sure what the survey was telling them or what they were trying to find out from it. Is it just how to run a better festival? Is it how people heard about it, what they'd like to see? So I think some of those things, seeing how they use it, would be really helpful. I appreciated the additional budget description. It helped identify the in-kind items, which was nice. I agree with Eric. There really wasn't any demographic information about the community. I did appreciate, though, the information that they included about the Asian population and the rate of growth in Nevada, which I was not aware of. So that was really helpful for me to be able to learn that. What else? The video samples give a really nice look at the festival and the different art forms, which was nice. They uploaded a performer schedule, which was a little confusing. So if they included that in another application, maybe just some context to it, because I'm sure it makes perfect sense to them. I wasn't quite sure what I was looking at or how to read that document. So maybe just a little bit of more information with that if they decide to include that again. And those are my comments.
This is Jerry. Thank you. Kat, have you? Okay, could we have your score and comments, please?
I gave this a preliminary score of 100. I felt like it was very detailed, very organized. They know how many people they expect. They know exactly how much they're contributing in kind, in time and materials. You know, the collaborations for marketing and using multiple channels. I felt like I could follow along with everything, and I don't think, you know, as comparison to the other festival that I was filling in any gaps. I think what the other one was lacking, this one was in detail writing out. So I felt it was a great festival, great application.
Okay, this is Jerry again. Thank you very much. Sierra, do we need yours?
Yes, this
Okay.
is Sarah. My preliminary score is 89. I echo everything everyone else said about the evaluation plan, and had a detailed description of the project. Something I did want to point out is that in the budget, they had $1,500 for operating expenses as far as the use of the grant. So if this application is awarded, my recommendation to Nevada Arts Council staff would be to get an amended budget for them. They can, unless the guidelines have changed, they can do a de minimis 10% indirect cost rate, which would be $700 if they're funded $7,000. So that is, they could use some of those indirect costs on that budget line, but otherwise that needs to probably come out of the budget. I also appreciated the detailed description of Asian population growth. I liked that they kind of were discussing anime to bring in younger demographics. Those interesting culturally. I appreciated the use of artists from both the local community, the national and the international community. And I thought that the list of artists and work samples and additional support material was all very thorough.
This is Jerry again. Thank you. I think that's everyone. Okay, any final or additional thoughts or comments on this applicant? Okay, Tony, could you work on the final scoring?
Thank you, Jerry. This is Tony. We are reviewing final scores for PGO 24-19 Kizuna Japanese Society. I will begin with Kat, your preliminary and final score, please.
I gave it a preliminary score of 100 and I am keeping it.
Thank you, Kat. Rachel.
I gave them a preliminary of 81, but I would like to raise that up to 90 based on the artistic quality and the diverse art forms that are presented.
Thank you, Rachel. Sierra.
This is Sierra. My initial score was 89, but I'm also going to raise that to 92. In rereading my my comments, I would raise my score in both the project planning and management and in the artistic excellence section.
Thank you, Sierra. Eric.
This is Eric. His initial score was 95. I'm going to keep that scoring.
Thank you, Eric. And Suzanne.
You know what? I'm having such, my computer's so bad going back and forth. I think I said 93.
You did, yes.
Well, hooray for me.
And that is your final score as well?
Yes.
Thank you. Final scores for PGO 24-19 Kizuna Japanese Society. Suzanne, 93. Kat, 100. Rachel, 90. Sierra, 92. Eric, 95. for a final average score of 94 even.
This is Jerry. Very good. Thank you, Tony. And the next one is PGO 24-20, Board of Regents, NSHE, OBO, University of Nevada, Reno, the Lilly Museum. The Counter/Self, an exhibition at the Lilly Museum of Art that will bring together a diverse group of indigenous and diasporic artists who create imaginative alter egos to examine, perform, and subvert identity constructs. Let us begin with Kat. Could you share your score and your thoughts, please?
I'm lucky I have two screens. It sounds like Suzanne just has one. And still with two screens, I can't switch fast enough between everything I have open. And I'm just going to put it on the record that I said earlier that I do work for UNR for the extension. And this is the Lilly Museum that's also part of UNR. And we've had very extensive discussions, me and the staff, and UNR has so many departments. We felt there was no conflict of interest because I have no affiliation with the Lilly Museum, just because I work for the extension in Tonopah. But I wanted to point that out so that it's not, implied that I had any kind of favoritism to this organization that applied. But I did give the Lilly Museum a score of 98 because I felt like it was a very good application, very detailed answers, very organized. I felt it was reasonable cost for the fact that this is an international exhibit that has to travel to Reno, that the art is from underrepresented members, that they have technological aids for the exhibit. And the little criticism that I had is I didn't think that the marketing budget was big enough for the big project that it is in order to reach as many people as you want. That should have been a little bigger to get people to come and see this exhibit.
Great, thank you very much. This is Jerry. Excuse me. Eric, excuse me, could we get your thoughts and your score, please?
Certainly, Jerry. This is Eric. I gave this project a 97. I also thought it was a really good application. The exhibit sounds really interesting and really performs the functions it says it's going to. My question for them had more to do with whether this is a traveling show that they brought in, so the artists were pre-selected by that show and it's traveling internationally around, or was there an application process for those artists or for the show itself? How do they make the determination to bring the show in? Just interested to know the process of that more than anything else, because I do think it's a great show. I think they know what they're doing. They hit a lot of the things that what their dedication to DEI with this show is evident. Big fan of the fact that they are aware that they're ADA compliant facilities and they're taking a look at that they're reaching out to members of the LGBTQ plus community. I just think this is a great project. So 97.
This is Jerry. Thank you. Rachel, could we get your score and your thoughts, please?
Yeah, this is Rachel Morgan. I gave them a preliminary score of 85. So there's a couple of things, and so I'm so glad I'm serving on a panel with visual artists. I found the idea of structured observation really interesting. I hadn't heard that used before. Once again, visual art is not my background, so I don't know if this is a new thing or this is what they do now. But I also, yeah, I would just love to learn more. So I thought that was really great. The thing that kind of hung me up about this application was I wanted to see more outreach beyond the student body. And that's what I kind of felt was missing. Otherwise, it seems a little bit like it's geared towards the students and not the community in general. And this kind of goes back to Kat's comment about the marketing, is that I was concerned there wasn't enough marketing. And I think that kind of impacted my concern that this wasn't a community engagement project, because how are they going to know about it? How are they going to be able to participate? So I think it all kind of it wraps into that community engagement part that I was concerned about what was happening outside of the university setting. And then I was also curious about the selection process and how that worked. If there was a criteria, who did that? So I was also curious about that process. It would have strengthened the application to talk a little bit about that. And those are my comments.
This is Jerry. Thank you. Suzanne, could we get your score and your comments, please?
Yeah, I scored this a 96. I'm going to stick with that. I'm pretty excited about this exhibition. The only thing I wanted would be, they talked about some Nevada artists being also included in the exhibition, perhaps in an adjacent gallery, but it was kind of not really described. And I would have appreciated knowing who those artists were as well. But, you know, I gotta stand up for Nevada when it takes a giant leap. And I think this exhibition is kind of a giant leap.
This is Jerry. Thank you. Sierra, could we get your score and your comments, please?
This is Sierra. My preliminary score for this application is 88. I thought it was a really strong artistic concept, and I appreciate the inclusion of Nevada artists. However, it says we will work with local and regional artists who address similar themes, but there was no information about how those are selected, who those are, anything about that. So that was a gap for me. I did appreciate the inclusion of the exhibit in the college curriculum, which is kind of counter to what Rachel had brought up, and that I think is a really good point about reaching the community at large. Strong evaluation plan. I think Eric had mentioned something about their ADA compliant. And while they are, it was a really light answer, and I would have loved to at least see a list of maybe their, I think they said they leverage technological aids. And I just would have liked to know what those were in a little bit more detail about that. And I applaud the diversity of the confirmed artists that they did include.
This is this is Jerry again. Thank you. Do we have any additional thoughts or comments on this applicant? Okay, Tony, could you share on the final scoring?
Yes, thank you, Jerry. This is Tony. We'll be reviewing final scores for PGO 2420, Board of Regents, NSHE, University of Nevada, Reno, the Lilly Museum. Rachel, I'll begin the scoring with you. Your preliminary and final scores, please.
This is Rachel. My preliminary score was 85, but I'd like to change that to 88 based on the diversity and quality of the artists.
Thank you. Sierra.
This is Sierra. My initial score was 88, but in reviewing my comments and hearing the other panelists' comments, I'd like to change that to a 91, mostly based on, again, the community impact and artistic merit of the piece. I think I was getting bogged down in some of the details on this.
Thank you, Sierra. Eric.
So this is Eric. My preliminary score was a 97. I actually want to bring that down a couple points to 95. I didn't realize what Rachel brought up, where it was primarily reaching to the students and not the community at large so much. So I want to adjust for that.
Thank you, Eric. Suzanne.
96.
Thank you. And Kat.
My preliminary score was 98. And I'm also adjusting that down just a little bit to 94 because I did overlook that portion about the artist selection. I think I just read it as like an existing exhibit that's being brought in, not that they're curating it and the outreach beyond the student body.
Thank you, Kat. Final scores, PGO 24-20 for the Board of Regents, NSHE, University of Nevada, Reno Lilly Museum, Suzanne 96, Kat 94, Rachel 88, Sierra 91, Eric 95 for a final average score of 92.8.
This is Jerry. Thank you, Tony. I think we need a break. This brings us to the conclusion of day one of
Good.
the FY24 Project Grant for Organization panel. We'll now take public comment. Is there anyone joining us today who wishes to provide public comment at this time?
This is Tony. For any of our attendees who have any public comment who are on the webinar here today, if you would use the raise hand function in Zoom, and I will select how allow to talk if you have any public comments. All right, seeing none, and we have none in our conference room. And Stephanie, any public comments that came through the grants email address?
This is Stephanie. No, we have not had any.
Great, thank you, Stephanie. So Jerry, no public comments at this time.
This is Jerry again. Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, you are an impressive group. I have to admit. So thank you. Day one of the grant review panel is adjourned. So thank you, panelists, for your work today, and we will reconvene Friday, August 14th at 9:30 a.m. To continue and finish the review of applicants for the FY24 Project Grant for Organizations. Well, thank you and see you on Friday.
Yeah, and just a reminder, I won't be there, but we'll let you know, be on annual leave. Thanks, guys.
Sorry, Harry, your audio was pretty choppy, but I believe you said you will not be there on the August 4th meeting because you're on annual leave, but you'll have someone from the Deputy Attorney General's office there in your place.
Hopefully my audio is a little better next time.
No worries.
You did a great job.
Thank you. Thanks, Harry. And thanks to everybody. And we'll see you all on Friday the 14th at 9:30 a.m.
Thank you.
Thank you.